Marcus Blackwood, a con artist with a 12-page criminal record, shocked everyone when he purchased Westlake Apartments and immediately told all 57 families they would never pay rent again. Behind his calculated smile and designer suit lay a secret that would transform not just the crumbling building, but the broken lives of everyone who called it home. What dark chapter from Marcus's past drove him to sacrifice millions for strangers? Comment below if you've ever witnessed an unexpected act of kindness. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories of unlikely redemption. 3 days after the purchase, residents of Westlake Apartments received notices under their doors: mandatory meeting, lobby, 7 p.m. All residents must attend. The photocopied paper sent waves of panic through the building. It's happening. We're all getting evicted, whispered Mrs. Diaz from to see to her neighbor in the narrow hallway with its flickering lights. Rich man in a fancy car buying this dump. What else could it be? Replied Mr. Kwan, clutching his cane tighter. By 6:45, the lobby was packed with anxious faces. Children clung to parents' legs. Elderly residents leaned against walls stained with decades of neglect. The overhead light buzzed incessantly, casting harsh shadows across worried expressions. At precisely 7 o'clock, Marcus strode through the front door in a tailored charcoal suit that cost more than most residents earned in months. The murmuring crowd fell silent. "Thank you all for coming," he began, his voice clear and confident. "My name is Marcus Blackwood. As you may have heard, I now own this building." Alina Rodriguez, a nurse's aide raising 2 children in apartment 3F, pushed her way to the front. "Just tell us how long we have before you kick us out," she challenged, arms crossed protectively over her chest. Marcus studied her face, the exhaustion etched around her eyes, the defiant tilt of her chin, and something shifted in his expression. "I'm not evicting anyone," he said simply. Confused glances circulated through the crowd. "In fact," Marcus continued, "as of today, no one in this building will pay rent again. Ever." The silence that followed was absolute. Even the building's perpetually running pipes seemed to pause. "This is some kind of joke," Alina finally said, breaking the spell, "or a trick." "What's the catch?" "No catch," Marcus replied. "The building is paid for. Renovations will begin next week, starting with the heating system and structural repairs. You'll all receive temporary housing stipends during any work that requires relocation." An elderly man in the back called out, "Why would you do this?" Marcus straightened his tie, nervous gesture, at odds with his composed facade. "Consider it an investment in something that matters." Questions erupted from all sides. Marcus answered each one with the same calm precision he'd used to talk wealthy marks out of millions. Yes, they could stay as long as they wished. No, there would be no hidden fees. Yes, he was serious. As the meeting dispersed, residents huddled in disbelieving clusters. Children tugged at parents' sleeves, asking if Christmas had come early. Elderly neighbors wept quietly. Alina lingered, studying Marcus with narrowed eyes. "Nobody does something for nothing," she said, "especially not men like you." "Men like me?" Marcus raised an eyebrow. "I googled you before the meeting. You're a con man. You've stolen millions." A flicker of something respect perhaps crossed Marcus's face. "You're right to be suspicious, Ms. Rodriguez. But sometimes people surprise you. I don't believe in fairy godmothers, Mr. Blackwood." "Neither do I." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "I believe in debts that need repaying." As Marcus walked away, his phone buzzed. It was his partner Jake. "Tell me you didn't actually buy that shithole." Jake's voice crackled through the speaker. Marcus watched an elderly couple supporting each other as they slowly climbed the stairs, their faces still stunned with disbelief. "It's all part of the long game," Marcus replied, the lie sliding easily from his lips. "I'll explain later." He ended the call and stood alone in the dim lobby, listening to the sounds of the building, a baby crying on the 3rd floor, a television blaring on the 2nd, laughter somewhere distant. For the first time in 20 years, he felt something loosen in his chest. Behind him, Alina Rodriguez watched his reflection in the tarnished lobby mirror, her face a battlefield of hope and suspicion. 6 months earlier, Marcus had stood in an opulent penthouse overlooking Central Park, swirling a glass of 30-year-old scotch while a tech billionaire signed over to $1 million for exclusive rights to a non-existent quantum computing patent. "You're making history, Robert," Marcus had said, his voice a perfect blend of deference and authority. "5 years from now, everyone will wonder how you saw the potential when others missed it." The billionaire had beamed, already imagining the accolades. By the time he discovered the truth, Marcus would be gone, the money laundered through a labyrinth of offshore accounts. "You're an artist," Jake had told him later that night, as they celebrated in a private club. Jake was shorter than Marcus, with a perpetual 5 o'clock shadow and eyes that constantly scanned for opportunities or threats. "The way you read people, it's like you can see right through them." Marcus had merely nodded, already mentally moving on to the next score. He didn't tell Jake that what he really saw when he looked at wealthy Marks was an opportunity. It was his mother's face the night they'd been evicted, her expression as she realized they had nowhere to go. Now, in his downtown loft, Jake paced furiously while Marcus calmly packed a suitcase. "You spent $8 million on a rat-infested building. and now you're telling residents they don't have to pay rent. Jake ran his hands through his hair. Have you lost your mind? What's the angle here? I told you, it's a long con, Marcus replied, carefully folding an Italian silk shirt. Real estate development. The neighborhood's gentrifying. In 5 years, that property will be worth triple bullshit. Jake kicked a chair. You've never cared about slow money, and you don't give handouts. Marcus continued packing, his movements methodical. Trust me, this is going to work. You're not telling me something. Jake narrowed his eyes. Is this about that detective? The one who's been sniffing around our operation? A flicker of irritation crossed Marcus's face. Detective Diana Chen had been tracking him for nearly 3 years, coming close several times, but never quite gathering enough evidence. She was smart, tenacious, and completely incorruptible. This has nothing to do with Chen, Marcus said firmly. Then what? You having some kind of breakdown midlife crisis? Jake was genuinely confused. We were supposed to hit the Peterson account next month. That's at least $4 million. Marcus closed his suitcase with a decisive click. The Peterson job is off. I need to focus on Westlake for a while. Focus on. Jake threw up his hands. Listen to yourself. Since when do you play charity worker? Marcus fixed Jake with a cold stare. I need you to back off. This is my money, my decision. Fine, Jake spat. Waste your fortune, but when this blows up in your face, don't come crying to me. After Jake stormed out, Marcus stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse, looking out at the glittering city. His reflection stared back. Design a suit, expertly styled hair, the perfect image of success. A disguise as carefully constructed as any he'd ever worn for a con. His phone buzzed with a news alert. He glanced down to see his own face in a grainy surveillance photo accompanying the headline. Notorious con artist purchases slum property. Residents fear mass eviction. Below the headline was a quote from Detective Diana Chen. We're monitoring the situation closely. Mr. Blackwood has a history of sophisticated financial schemes, targeting vulnerable individuals. Marcus smiled faintly. Chen was good, one step behind but never giving up. In another life, they might have been friends. Or more. His phone rang. The caller ID showed Detective Chen. Speak of the devil, he murmured, answering with practiced charm. Detective, what a pleasant surprise. Cut the crap, Blackwood. Her voice was crisp, professional, with an underlying edge of determination. What game are you playing with Westlake Apartments? No game? Just business. Your business is conning people. You wound me, detective. He kept his tone light. Perhaps I'm turning over a new leaf. A derisive snort came through the line. People like you don't change. People like me. He echoed Elena Rodriguez's words from earlier. Predators, Chen said flatly. Whatever you're planning, I'll stop you. Tell me, detective, Marcus said, his voice softening. Have you actually visited Westlake? Seen how the residents live? A hesitation. I know slumlords are scum, but con artists wearing savior costumes aren't much better. Come see for yourself. The invitation surprised him as much as it clearly surprised her. Tomorrow, no games. Another pause. I'll be watching you, Blackwood. After she hung up, Marcus gazed at the city lights, remembering another night, another city, sleeping in a car while snow piled up outside, his mother's hand growing cold in his. His reflection stared back, and for a moment he saw her face superimposed over his own. The next morning, Marcus arrived at Westlake wearing jeans and a simple button, far cry from his usual tailored suits. He carried a leather-bound notebook and a digital camera, tools for documenting the building's condition before renovations began. The lobby smelled of mildew, and something else, a sour note of despair that seemed embedded in the walls themselves. Graffiti scarred the mailboxes, most of which hung open with broken locks. Water stains mapped the ceiling like dark continents. Marcus moved methodically, floor by floor, knocking on doors, introducing himself, asking permission to inspect apartments. Some residents refused, eyeing him with suspicion. Others welcomed him with desperate hope, eager to show him broken windows, faulty wiring, roach infestations. By noon, he'd filled half his notebook with detailed notes and his camera with damning evidence of Vernon Mill's neglect, the consistent pattern of ignored maintenance requests, dangerous electrical issues, and health hazards painted a clear picture of systematic exploitation. When he knocked on apartment 4B, the door was opened by an elderly black man with silver hair and eyes clouded by cataracts. He leaned heavily on a wooden cane, regarding Marcus with cautious dignity. Mr. Washington? Marcus consulted his tenant list. I'm Marcus Blackwood, the new owner. May I come in to assess your apartment? Been expecting you. Mr. Washington stepped back, his movements slow and deliberate. Heard about your announcement? Still trying to figure if you're an angel or the devil in disguise? Marcus stepped inside and froze. The apartment was meticulously clean surfaces, dusted floors swept, but the conditions were appalling. A blue tarp covered half the ceiling where water leaked from above. The single radiator sat cold and useless against one wall. Buckets collected drips in 3 different locations. Heat? Hasn't worked in 3 winters? Mr. Washington said, matter of. Pipes burst last December. Mr. Mills said. Fixing it wasn't economically viable. Marcus made notes, his handwriting tighter than usual, and the ceiling. Been like that 18 months. I cover my bed with plastic when it rains. The apartment was sparsely furnished but arranged with care. On a small table sat several framed photographs. Mr. Washington followed Marcus's gaze. My Martha, he picked up one frame, passing it to Marcus. Married 53 years. The photo showed a handsome couple on their wedding day. Mr. Washington in a sharp uniform, his bride radiant in a modest white dress. She's beautiful, Marcus said quietly. Was? Mr. Washington's voice dropped. Pneumonia took her last February. This apartment took her, is what I mean to say. Marcus looked up sharply. No heat, mold in the walls. The old man's voice remained steady, but his hand trembled slightly on his cane. Doctor at the hospital said her lungs were full of fluid. Said people her age shouldn't live in these conditions. He shuffled to a drawer and removed a folder of papers. I showed Mr. Mills the medical report, begged him to fix the heat. He said if I didn't like it, I could move out. A bitter laugh. Where's an 83-year-old man with no family supposed to go? Marcus stood very still, his face unreadable. May I see the medical report? As he read the document, his expression hardened. The doctor had explicitly linked Mrs. Washington's respiratory condition to environmental factors consistent with substandard housing conditions. Mr. Mills knew about this. Marcus's voice was dangerously soft. Showed him myself. He said it wasn't his problem. Mr. Washington reclaimed the report, carefully returning it to its folder. Month after Martha passed, he raised the rent. Said units with single occupants should pay a premium. Marcus was silent for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was controlled, but a muscle twitched in his jaw. Mr. Washington, I'll have a crew here tomorrow to fix your ceiling and heating. Tonight, I'd like to offer you a hotel room while they work. I don't leave my home. The refusal was gentle but firm. Lived here 30 years? It's all I have left of her. Marcus nodded, respecting the decision. Then I'll have portable heaters and dehumidifiers delivered today. And I'd like to talk to you more about Martha, if that's all right. Her medical records could be important. Something in Marcus's tone made Mr. Washington study him more carefully. You're not just fixing this building for real estate value, are you, son? Marcus didn't answer directly. Instead, he asked, did other tenants get sick from these conditions? 3 children hospitalized for asthma last year. Mrs. Diaz downstairs has chronic bronchitis. The Rodriguez girl's always coughing. Mr. Washington shook his head. Mills knows. He just doesn't care. As Marcus prepared to leave, Mr. Washington called after him, whatever your game is, Mr. Blackwood, you should know something. People here are survivors. They've been promised things before. Don't make promises you won't keep. Outside apartment for B. Marcus leaned against the wall, his composure cracking. He pulled out his phone with shaking hands and dialed, I need emergency heating units delivered to Westlake Apartments. 20 of them, today. And I want a full construction crew here tomorrow morning. Priority 1 is apartment 4B. His voice hardened. I don't care what it costs, just make it happen. As he ended the call, he looked up to see Detective Chen watching him from the stairwell, her expression unreadable. Didn't expect to find you actually inspecting the property, Detective Chen said, approaching Marcus with measured steps. She was shorter than him by nearly a foot, but her presence filled the narrow hallway. Thought you'd delegate the dirty work. I like to be hands-on, Marcus replied, quickly regaining his composure. Did you come to arrest me, detective, or just to enjoy the ambience of this lovely establishment? Chen glanced at the water-stained ceiling, the peeling paint. I came to see what you're really up to. Her dark eyes assessed him coolly. The Marcus Blackwood I've been tracking for 3 years doesn't do charity. Perhaps you don't know me as well as you think. I know you ran a Ponzi scheme that cost retirees their life savings in Phoenix. I know you sold fake art to collectors in Miami. I know you've created at least 7 shell companies to launder money. She took a step closer. What I don't know is why you're suddenly playing Robin Hood. Before Marcus could respond, a door creaked open at the end of the hallway. A small figure slipped out, glancing nervously at the adults, before settling on the stairs with a sketchbook. Who's that? Marcus asked, grateful for the interruption. Expression softened slightly. Leo Vasquez. Lives with his mother in 5C. Marcus excused himself from the detective and approached the boy, who appeared to be about 10 years old. He sat hunched over his sketchbook, pencil moving in confident strokes across the page. That's good, Marcus said, keeping a respectful distance. You're talented. The boy looked up, startled. Dark eyes studied Marcus warily from beneath a mop of unruly black hair. A faded Spider-Man t-shirt hung loosely on his thin frame. You're the guy who bought the building, Leo said finally. The one who said no more rent. Marcus nodded, then gestured to the empty step beside Leo. May I? After a moment's hesitation, Leo shrugged. Marcus sat down, careful to leave space between them. What are you drawing? Leo hesitated, then turned his sketchbook. The page showed a detailed rendering of the building not as it was, but as it could be. Gone were the cracked windows and crumbling facade. In their place stood a transformed structure with a rooftop garden, large windows, and people gathered. Outside, this is how I think it could look, Leo explained, his voice gaining confidence. If someone actually fixed it. Marcus studied the drawing with genuine admiration. You've got a good eye for architecture. Have you always liked to draw? Yeah, Mom says, I get it from my dad. A shadow crossed Leo's face. He used to draw too. Is he? Prison. Leo's voice was matter-of-fact. 5 more years. He was a good guy who made bad choices. That's what Mom says. Marcus nodded, unsure how to respond. We moved here after he went away, Leo continued, turning to a new page in his sketchbook. Mom works 3 jobs now. I don't see her much, so you sit here and draw. Leo nodded. Can't draw in our apartment? The walls have black stuff growing on them, makes me cough. Mold, Marcus murmured, making a mental note. Mom tried to clean it, but it keeps coming back. Mr. Mills said it was our fault for taking showers that were too hot. Leo rolled his eyes. But the shower's never hot. Marcus felt a familiar anger rising. Is your mom home now? Leo shook his head. Hospital. She's a cleaner there. Won't be home till late. And you're here alone. Mrs. Diaz checks on me. Leo shrugged. I'm old enough. Marcus wasn't convinced, but said nothing. He turned back to the sketchbook. May I see more of your drawings? Leo flipped through pages of detailed sketches, some of the building reimagined, others of fellow residents. Still others of fantastic creatures and superheroes. The talent was unmistakable. These are exceptional, Marcus said honestly. You could be an architect or an artist someday. Leo's expression darkened. Mom says art doesn't pay bills. It can, actually. Marcus gestured to the building in Leo's drawing. Someone designed this building. Someone gets paid to design every building. Really? Interest flickered in Leo's eyes. Really? It's called architecture, or urban design. People make good money doing it. For the first time, Leo smiled, a quick, bright flash that transformed his solemn face. The smile hit Marcus like a physical blow. Something about it triggered a memory so visceral that for a moment he couldn't breathe. Look what I drew, Another boy, another sketchbook, another lifetime ago. Are you okay, Mr.? Leo was staring at him. Marcus blinked, forcing the memory away. Fine, just ... remembered something. He stood abruptly. I should let you get back to your drawing. Leo nodded, already returning to his sketch. But as Marcus turned to leave, the boy called after him. Are you really going to fix the building? For real? Marcus looked back.
Yes.
Even the mold in our apartment, especially that. Leo studied him with eyes too old for his young face. Why? Nobody ever fixes anything here. Marcus hesitated, then answered with a rare moment of honesty. Because when I was about your age, I lived in a place like this. Nobody fixed anything there either. The boy considered this what happened. Bad things, Marcus said quietly. Things that shouldn't happen to anyone. Leo nodded, as if this made perfect sense. I hope you mean it. About fixing things. I do. The words felt like a vow. As Marcus walked away, he felt Detective Chen's eyes following him. He didn't look back, but he knew what she'd witnessed, a crack in his carefully constructed faca, and for once, he didn't care. That night, Marcus couldn't sleep. Leo's drawings haunted him, unlocking memories he'd spent decades burying. He poured himself a scotch and moved to the window of his temporary apartment, a modest 2-bedroom he'd rented near Westlake. Nothing like his luxury penthouse downtown. Rain streaked the glass, distorting the city lights. 20-5 years earlier, it had been snowing fat lazy flakes that 9-year-old Marcus Blackwood had watched through another window. This one foggy with condensation from too many bodies, crammed into too little space. The Horizon apartments hadn't been much different from Westlake. Same neglect, same desperation, same slumlord who collected rent while ignoring collapsing ceilings and faulty wiring. Marcus and his mother had lived in a 1-bedroom on the 3rd floor after his father abandoned them for a new family in another state. Sarah Blackwood had been beautiful once Marcus had seen it in the few photographs she kept, but by the time they moved to Horizon, chronic stress and poverty had etched permanent lines around her eyes and mouth. Still, she'd maintained a fierce dignity, working to cleaning jobs while taking online classes, determined to give her son a better life. Education is the way out, Marky, she'd tell him, helping with homework at their wobbly kitchen table. They can take everything else, but they can't take what's in here. She'd tap his forehead gently. The eviction notice had come 3 days before Christmas. Their slumlord had raised the rent again, the 3rd increase that year. Sarah had begged for time, explaining that her second job had cut her hours. The slumlord had shrugged, saying he had 10 families waiting for any vacancy. They'd been given 48 hours to leave. It'll be okay, Sarah had promised, her smile brittle as she packed their meager belongings into trash bags. We'll stay at a shelter until I get my next paycheck. Then we'll find somewhere better. But the shelters had been full. A cold snap had driven the city's homeless population indoors. They'd spent that night in their ancient Honda Civic, Sarah draping her coat over Marcus in the back seat while she kept the engine running periodically for heat. Adventure time, she'd called it, trying to make it a game, like camping. The second night, the car wouldn't start. The temperature had dropped to 15 degrees. Mom, I'm cold, Marcus had whispered, his breath visible in the freezing air. Come here, baby. She'd pulled him close in the back seat, wrapping them both in their coats and a thin blanket. Body heat is the best heat. And look, we can see the stars through the window. He'd snuggled against her, drawing comfort from her warmth, her familiar smell of drugstore perfume and laundry detergent. Tell me the story again, he'd asked. About the house we're going to have. Sarah had smiled in the darkness. It's going to be a little blue house with white shutters and a big backyard where you can play. We'll plant a garden with tomatoes and peppers. Maybe get a dog, one of those scruffy mutts from the shelter. And no one can make us leave. No one, she'd promised. We'll own it ourselves, and no one can ever make us leave again. Somehow, he'd fallen asleep, lulled by her soft voice and the gentle stroking of her hand through his hair. When he awoke, the next morning, her hand was still in his hair, but it was cold and stiff. Her eyes were open, fixed on nothing. Marcus had shaken her, called her name, screamed for help. But he'd known, with a child's terrible intuition, that she was gone. The official cause of death was hypothermia. The real cause was a system that saw people like Sarah Blackwood as disposable. What followed was a blur of foster homes, some neglectful, some actively abusive. Marcus learned quickly that vulnerability was dangerous. He taught himself to read people, to tell them what they wanted to hear, to present whatever version of himself would keep him safe or get him what he needed. By 16, he'd run away for good, living on the streets, using his nascent con artist skills to survive. By 20, he'd created a new identity, erasing all traces of the frightened boy from Horizon Apartments. By 30, he'd amassed his first million through a complex real estate scam targeting the same type of slumlord who had evicted his mother. It became his specialty, finding wealthy people who profited from others' misery and separating them from their money. He didn't see it as stealing, but as a form of justice. The fact that he kept the money instead of redistributing it was a detail he chose not to examine too closely. Now, staring out at the rain, Marcus finished his scotch in one burning swallow. Tomorrow, contractors would begin work on Westlake Apartments. The mold in Leo's apartment would be the first priority. His phone buzzed a text from Jake, still waiting to hear the angle on this charity stunt. Investors asking questions. Marcus ignored it. Jake wouldn't understand. No one would. How could he explain that when he looked at Leo? He saw himself, that when he walked through Westlake, he heard his mother's voice, felt her cold hand in his. The only person who might understand was Detective Chen, who had seen something in his face today when he spoke to Leo, something real beneath the con. His phone buzzed again. Not Jake this time, but Chen herself. Background check on Vernon Mills complete. Multiple building code violations. 3 previous lawsuits settled quietly. Nothing criminal that would stick. Yet Marcus smiled faintly. She was smart, connecting the dots. Seeing that his interest in Westlake went beyond philanthropy, he texted back, looking for a smoking gun. Her reply came quickly. Always. Question. Are you handing it to me on purpose? Marcus didn't respond. Instead, he opened his laptop and began compiling a document. Every violation he'd documented today. Every tenant complaint, every medical issue tied to the building's conditions. At the top, he placed Mr. Washington's statement about his wife's death. It wasn't enough for legal prosecution, not yet, but it was a start. Outside, the rain continued, washing the city clean. Marcus thought of Leo's drawings, the building transformed, people gathering outside, a community reborn. For the first time in decades, he allowed himself to remember his mother's smile, her dreams of a little blue house where no one could make them leave. I'm trying, Mom, he whispered to the empty room. I'm finally trying. Construction crews arrived at Westlake Apartments at precisely 7 a.m. the next day. 3 trucks, 15 workers, and enough equipment to indicate this was no cosmetic touch. Residents gathered in small clusters, watching with a mixture of hope and skepticism as men in hard hats unloaded tools and materials. Marcus arrived shortly after, dressed in jeans and a simple button-down, a clipboard in hand. He greeted the foreman with a firm handshake. Priority 1 is Apartment 5, see serious mold remediation, he instructed. Then for B-ceiling repair and complete HVAC overhaul. I want every unit inspected for immediate safety concerns by end of day. The foreman nodded, clearly accustomed to wealthy clients with demanding tenants. Will need to relocate residents from the most severely affected units. Already arranged, Marcus handed over a folder. Hotel accommodations for anyone who needs to vacate temporarily. Transportation provided. As they discussed logistics, Elena Rodriguez approached a nurse's scrubs, indicating she'd just finished a night shift. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, but her gaze was sharp as she took in the construction activity. So it wasn't just talk, she said, stopping beside Marcus. It wasn't quite a question. I don't waste time on talk. Ms. Rodriguez. Marcus checked his watch. Your apartment will be inspected today. The mold situation in your unit is high priority. Elena's eyebrows rose slightly. How did you know about the mold? Your son mentioned it. Leo, I met him yesterday. A flash of maternal concern crossed her face. He's supposed to stay with Mrs. Diaz while I'm working. He was just in the hallway, drawing. Talented kid. Something in Marcus's tone made Elena study him more carefully. He wants to be an artist. I keep telling him to focus on something practical, something stable. Sometimes talent finds its own path. Marcus replied, remembering his own mother's emphasis on practical education. Before Alina could respond, a commotion near the entrance caught their attention. Detective Chen stood in the doorway, badge displayed, questioning one of the construction workers. She wore plain clothes, dark jeans, and a leather jacket, but her authoritative stance marked her immediately as law enforcement. Your police friend is back, Alina observed dryly. Not my friend, Marcus muttered, then excused himself to intercept the detective. Chen looked up as he approached, dismissing the clearly relieved worker. Quite an operation you've got going here, Blackwood. Just fulfilling my responsibilities? As a property owner, he gestured toward the building. Care for a tour? See how your tax dollars aren't being spent on housing enforcement. A reluctant smile tugged at Chun's lips. Always the charmer. She fell into step beside him. I ran background checks on Vernon Mills. He's got a pattern of buying distressed properties, minimizing upkeep while maximizing rent, then selling before major systems fail completely. Sounds familiar. I bet it does. Chen's voice sharpened. What I can't figure out is why you care. This isn't your usual playground. You target the wealthy, not the vulnerable. Marcus led her toward the stairwell. Maybe I'm expanding my horizons, or maybe this is personal. Chen stopped, forcing him to face her. What's your connection to Westlake? For a moment, Marcus considered telling her the truth about his mother, about the Horizon apartments, about waking up in a frozen car. Instead, he deflected with a question of his own. Why did you become a cop? Detective? Why fraud specifically? Chen's dark eyes narrowed. That's not relevant, isn't it? People choose their battles for a reason. He gestured toward a water-stained ceiling. Someone hurt you, or someone you care about? That's why you're here. Not at a desk pushing papers on Wall Street crime. The flash in her eyes told him he'd hit close to home. Chen opened her mouth to respond when they were interrupted by a worker calling down from the third floor. Mr. Blackwood, you need to see this. Found something behind the walls in 3C. Excuse me, Marcus said, already moving toward the stairs. Chen followed, professional curiosity overriding their verbal sparring. In apartment 3C, workers had opened a section of wall to access plumbing. Behind the crumbling drywall, they'd discovered an electrical junction box with exposed wires dangerously close to a leaking water pipe. Jesus, the foreman breathed. This could have caused a fire any minute. Who the hell did this wiring? Marcus turned to Chen. Document this. It's deliberate negligence. She was already taking photos with her phone. This alone isn't enough to build a case against Mills. It's a start. Marcus turned to the foreman. I want every wall opened. Document everything you find. I'll double your fee if you can give me evidence of systematic code violations. As the workers continued their inspection, Marcus and Chen moved through the building. Each floor revealed new horrors: gas leaks, structural damage, makeshift repairs that created more hazards than they solved. Mills knew, Marcus said, his voice tight with controlled anger. He knew and did nothing. Chen watched him carefully. This isn't just about building code violations for you. Before Marcus could respond, his phone rang. Jake's name flashed on the screen. He declined the call. Problem? Chen asked. Nothing important. Marcus pocketed his phone. I have a meeting with the city inspector tomorrow. I'd like you to be there. Chen raised an eyebrow. Why would I do that? Because whatever you think of me, we both want Mills held accountable. He met her gaze directly. You can use me to build your case. Detective, I don't mind. Using a con man to catch a slumlord? Chen shook her head, but there was a glint of something like respect in her eyes. Poetic justice, something like that. As they descended to the lobby, they found it transformed into an impromptu command center. Residents lined up to report issues in their apartments, while workers organized into teams. The atmosphere had shifted, hopelessness giving way to cautious optimism. Leo sat on the stairs, sketchbook open, capturing the scene with quick, confident strokes. When he saw Marcus, he held up his drawing. The lobby filled with workers streaming through windows that had been boarded up for years. Is this okay? He asked. Marcus nodded, something tightening in his chest. It's perfect. Behind him, Detective Chen watched the exchange, her expression thoughtful. By the end of the first week, 17 families had been temporarily relocated to hotels, while their apartments underwent major renovations. The remaining residents lived amid the controlled chaos of construction, the building alive with the sounds of drilling, hammering, and workers calling to each other in multiple languages. Alina Rodriguez and Leo were among those who stayed, their apartment needing mold remediation but not a complete overhaul. Each morning, Alina would leave for her shift at the hospital, and each evening, she'd return to find more progress: new windows installed, mold-infested drywall removed, fresh paint, brightening dingy hallways. She remained cautious, waiting for the catch, the hidden agenda behind Marcus Blackwood's generosity. She'd Googled him extensively, reading about his suspected cons, his targets, his methods. The stories painted a picture of a brilliant manipulator who specialized in elaborate schemes, none of which explained his interest in Westlake. On Friday evening, Alina arrived home to find Leo sitting in the newly renovated lobby with Marcus. They were hunched over architectural drawings, discussing the redesign of the rooftop space. A garden here, Leo was saying, pointing to his sketch, and maybe a playground for the little kids. What about a workspace for artists? Marcus suggested. With good light, you could use it. Leo's face lit up. Really? Like a real studio? Why not? We have the space. Alina cleared her throat, and both looked up. Leo immediately jumped to his feet. Mom, Mr. Blackwood says we might have a garden on the roof, and a place for artists to work, is that so? Elena's tone was neutral, but her eyes on Marcus were questioning. Why don't you go upstairs and start your homework? I'll be up in a minute. When Leo had reluctantly departed, clutching his drawings, Alina took his place on the bench. You're spending a lot of time with my son, she said, not accusatory but firm. He's a remarkable kid, Marcus replied. Talented, smart. He reminds me of someone I used to know. That's what worries me. Alina leaned forward. I still don't understand what you're doing here, Mr. Blackwood. Men like you don't suddenly develop a conscience without a reason. Marcus met her gaze steadily. You're right to be suspicious. In your position, I would be too. Then help me understand. Why Westlake? Why now? For a moment, Marcus seemed to debate internally. Then he sighed. When I was Leo's age, I lived in a building much like this one. Things didn't end well. Alina studied him, her nurse's training helping her read the micro-expressions that flickered across his face: pain, regret, resolve. That doesn't explain why a successful con artist would spend millions on a charity project. She persisted. Maybe I'm tired of that life. Marcus looked away. Or maybe this is just another con. Does it matter if the building gets fixed? Before Alina could respond, her phone rang. She answered, her professional calm immediately giving way to alarm. When how high? She listened intently. I'll be right there. She ended the call, already standing. I have to go. It's my daughter Mia. She's at the hospital. Her fever spiked. What's wrong with her? Marcus was on his feet as well. Chronic bronchial issues. The doctors think it's linked to the mold exposure. Elena's voice cracked slightly. She's only 6. She's been in and out of the hospital since we moved here. I'll drive you, Marcus said immediately. That's not neck, please. It's faster than waiting for a cab. 10 minutes later, they were in Marcus's car, speeding toward the hospital. Alina sat rigid in the passenger seat, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Leo will be worried, she said suddenly. I didn't have time to explain. I can send someone to check on him. Mrs. Diaz? Maybe. Alina nodded gratefully. At a red light, Marcus sent a quick text, then resumed driving. This happens often, he asked quietly. Too often. Alina stared out the window. Mia's always been delicate. When we moved to Westlake, she started getting sick more frequently. The doctors linked it to mold exposure, but Mr. Mills refused to address it. Said if we didn't like the conditions, we could move out. Marcus's hands tightened on the steering wheel. Why didn't you? Where would we go? Alina laughed bitterly. I make $14.50 an hour as a nurse's aide. I clean houses on weekends. After my husband went to prison, it took every penny I had just to secure that apartment. Leo's father, Ricardo. Elena's voice softened. He made mistakes. Bad ones. But he loved those kids. She shook her head. He got involved with the wrong people, thought he could make quick money to give us a better life. Now he's serving 8 years, and I'm working 3 jobs just to keep a roof over our heads. They pulled up to the emergency entrance. Alina was out of the car before Marcus had fully stopped. Rushing through the sliding doors, he followed more slowly, feeling like an intruder in this deeply personal crisis. Inside, Alina was already speaking rapidly to a nurse, who led her through double doors to the treatment area. Marcus sat in the waiting room, uncertain why he was still there, yet unable to leave. An hour passed, then another. He answered emails, made calls about the construction at Westlake, sent Mrs. Diaz a message checking on Leo. Just as he was considering leaving, Alina emerged, looking exhausted but relieved. She's stabilized, she said, dropping into the chair beside him. They've got her on oxygen and antibiotics. The doctor wants to keep her overnight for observation. That's good news, Marcus said. Do you need anything? Food? Coffee? Alina shook her head, then changed her mind. Actually, coffee would be amazing. When Marcus returned with 2 cups, Alina was staring at her phone, her expression troubled. Problem: Leo's worried. He wants to come see his sister, but there's no one to bring him. She looked up. Thank you for staying. You didn't have to. Marcus handed her the coffee. Is there someone else who could bring Leo? I would offer, but But I don't know you well enough to trust you with my child, Alina finished bluntly. Smart decision. An awkward silence fell between them. Finally, Alina spoke again. The doctor said the new treatment for Mia will cost $4,000. Insurance only covers part of it. She laughed humorlessly. Just when I thought things might be looking up with the rent situation. Marcus was quiet for a moment. Then, carefully, I know specialists. I can make some calls. See if I don't want your charity. Alina interrupted sharply. It's not charity. Marcus struggled to find the right words. It's trying to fix something that should never have been broken in the first place. Alina studied him over her coffee cup. You keep talking like that? Like you're personally responsible for all this. Not responsible, but not innocent either. Marcus met her gaze. The world is full of Vernon Mills types. I've spent years targeting them, conning them, taking their money, but I never stopped to help the people they hurt. For the first time, Elena's expression softened slightly. So Westlake is what your redemption project? Something like that. Marcus looked away, though I'm not sure redemption is possible. It's Alina said quietly. I have to believe that. For Ricardo's sake. For my kids. A nurse appeared in the doorway. Ms. Rodriguez, Mia's asking for you. Alina stood, then hesitated. Would you, would you go check on Leo? Not alone, but with Mrs. Diaz? He gets scared when neither of us is home. The request this small extension of trust caught Marcus off guard. He nodded. Of course. And about that specialist, Alina added reluctantly. If you really know someone good, I'll make the call tonight. As Alina walked away, Marcus remained seated, turning his coffee cup slowly in his hands. For years, he'd convinced himself that conning the wealthy was a form of justice. But sitting in that hospital waiting room, watching a mother worry about her child, he understood the hollowness of that justification. Justice wasn't taking it, was fixing, healing, rebuilding. He pulled out his phone and dialed a number he hadn't used in years. Dr. Stevenson, it's Marcus Blackwood. I need a favor. 1 month into the renovations, Westlake Apartments had undergone a remarkable transformation. The lobby, once dim and neglected, now gleamed with fresh paint and new lighting. The persistent smell of mildew had been replaced by the clean scent of sawdust and paint. Broken mailboxes had been replaced, security cameras installed, and the front entrance secured with a proper intercom system. More significant than the physical changes, however, was the shift in the building's atmosphere. As basic safety concerns were addressed and living conditions improved, residents began to emerge. From the defensive isolation that had characterized life under Vernon Mills' ownership, it started small Mrs. Diaz from 2C bringing her famous empanadas to share with workers during their lunch break. Mr. Washington setting up a chessboard in the newly furnished common room, teaching patient lessons to anyone interested. The Patel family organizing a clothing swap in the laundry room, which now housed machines that actually worked. Marcus observed these developments with quiet satisfaction. Maintaining his distance, he supervised the renovations daily, but avoided inserting himself into the community's nascent social fabric. This wasn't about him, he reminded himself. It was about creating a space where people could thrive without fear of exploitation. On a warm Saturday morning, Marcus arrived to find unusual activity on the building's rooftop. Following the sound of voices and laughter, he emerged from the stairwell to discover a dozen residents clearing debris, marking out plots with string, and filling raised beds with soil. Leo spotted him first, waving enthusiastically from where he was helping Mr. Washington place seedlings into neat rows. Mr. Blackwood, come see, we're making the garden happen. Marcus approached, surprised. The rooftop garden had been in the renovation plans, but construction wasn't scheduled to begin for another 2 weeks. We got impatient, Alina explained. Appearing beside him with a trowel in hand and dirt smudged across her cheek, Leo showed everyone his designs, and people got excited. Mr. Patel used to farm in India. Mrs. Washington was a master gardener, and well, She gestured at the bustling activity. It just happened. You organized this? Marcus asked, impressed. Alina shrugged. People were asking how they could help with the renovations. This seemed like something we could do ourselves while the contractors handled the technical stuff. Marcus surveyed the scene. The Rodriguez children, Leo, and a smaller girl who must be Mia, worked alongside Mr. Washington. The elderly man moved slowly but with purpose, his weathered hands gentle with the delicate plants. Nearby, a young couple Marcus recognized from the 5th floor assembled a rainwater collection system. You should join us, Alina suggested. There's an empty plot that needs clearing. Marcus hesitated. I'm not really a gardener. Neither am I, Alina laughed. But Leo says everyone should grow something. It's good for the soul. Apparently, before Marcus could respond, Leo bounded over, his face alight with enthusiasm. Mom says you're going to help with the garden. You can have the spot next to ours. But that way, Marcus found he couldn't refuse. Soon he was on his knees beside Leo, learning the proper way to prepare soil for tomato plants. You have to dig deep, Leo instructed seriously. Tomatoes have long roots, is that so? Marcus followed the boy's directions, amused by his authoritative tone. Mr. Washington taught me. He says gardening is like life, you get out what you put in. From nearby, Mr. Washington chuckled. Smart boy, remembering an old man's ramblings. Not ramblings, Marcus said, wisdom. The morning passed in peaceful productivity. More residents arrived, bringing tools, seedlings, and food to share. Someone connected a portable speaker to their phone, filling the air with music. Children darted between the raised beds, carrying watering cans too big for their small frames. Around noon, Alina called for a break. Blankets were spread, and a potluck. Lunch emerged from bags and containers: Senora and Diaz's empanadas, Mr. Patel's samosas, Mrs. Kim's. Sit, Alina commanded, patting the blanket beside her. You've earned a break. Marcus sat awkwardly, unused to such casual community gatherings. Leo immediately plopped down beside him, while Mia, looking remarkably recovered from her hospital, stay curled up against her mother's side. Thanks for the doctor, Alina said quietly, passing Marcus a plate. Mia's breathing is better than it's been in a year. Dr. Stevenson is the best, Marcus replied, equally soft. I'm glad he could help. He said you paid for his medical school. Alina raised an eyebrow, said he owed you everything. Marcus shrugged uncomfortably. Ancient history. Before Alina could press further, Mr. Washington approached, lowering himself carefully onto the blanket with them. This garden, he said, gesturing around, is exactly what Martha would have wanted to see. His eyes, cloudy with cataracts, nonetheless shone with emotion. She always said plants bring hope. Tell us about Mrs. Washington, Leo requested, settling in for a story, as Mr. Washington began speaking of his late wife, her love of dahlias, her famous sweet potato pie, her habit of singing to her plants. Marcus found himself drawn into the conversation. Around them, similar exchanges were happening across the rooftop, residents sharing stories, laughing, arguing good-naturedly about the best way to grow peppers or whether to include a beehive. Marcus realized, with a strange tightness in his chest, that he was witnessing the birth of something he'd never experienced himself. A community where people looked out for each other, not out of obligation, but out of genuine care. It was, he thought, what his mother had dreamed of for them, a place where they belonged, where no one could make them leave. Deep thoughts? Alina asked, noting his silence. Just observing. Marcus replied. You did this, she said. All of this. Marcus shook his head. I just removed the barriers. You all did the rest. Alina studied him thoughtfully. You know, for a con man, you're not very good at taking credit. Before Marcus could respond, a commotion at the stairwell drew their attention. Detective Chen emerged onto the rooftop, looking distinctly out of place in her leather jacket amid the gardening tools and picnic blankets. Blackwood, she called, spotting him. We need to talk. Marcus excused himself and crossed to meet her. Detective, come to join our community garden initiative. Chen ignored his attempt at lightness. Vernon Mills is filing a lawsuit against you. He's claiming you misrepresented your intentions during the purchase of the building, costing him millions in potential profit. Let him, Marcus shrugged. The sale was legal, all paperwork in order. He's also spreading rumors about your past cons to the residents. Chen glanced around the rooftop, trying to turn them against you. Marcus followed her gaze to where Leo was showing Mia how to pat soil around a seedling, Alina watching them with a mother's protective pride. They already know who I am, he said quietly. I never pretended to be something I'm not. Chun's expression was skeptical. Really, because the Marcus Blackwood I've been tracking for 3 years doesn't do ... She gestured at the garden. The gathered residents ... This, maybe you never knew the real Marcus Blackwood. Maybe not, Chen admitted, but I'm starting to think I'd like to. Their eyes met, and for a moment, something unspoken passed between them, a recognition, perhaps, of the complicated motivations that drive people to become who they are. Moment was broken by Leo's voice calling across the rooftop. Mr. Blackwood, come quick. The first tomato is already growing. Duty calls, Marcus said with a small smile. Will you stay? There's plenty of food. Chen hesitated, then shook her head. Another time. But Blackwood. Her expression turned serious. Be careful. Mills isn't just angry, he's scared. You've threatened his business model, and men like that don't go down without a fight. As Chen departed, Marcus returned to the gardening plots where Leo waited excitedly to show him a tiny green tomato, no bigger than a marble. The boy's enthusiasm was infectious, and Marcus found himself genuinely interested in this small miracle of growth around them. The community continued to take shape, residents sharing knowledge, resources, and stories. From his peripheral vision, Marcus saw Alina watching him with Leo, her expression a complex mixture of gratitude and lingering wariness. Mr. Washington had been right, Marcus thought. You get out what you put in. And for the first time in decades, he was putting in something real. The lawsuit arrived with formal precision, a thick envelope of legal documents, delivered by a courier who seemed almost apologetic as he handed it to Marcus outside Westlake Apartments. Vernon Mills v. Marcus Blackwood. Complaint for fraudulent misrepresentation and breach of contract. Marcus skimmed the contents, a humorless smile playing at his lips. Mills claimed that Marcus had deliberately concealed his intentions to convert the building into a rent-free residence, thereby depriving Mills of fair market value that included the property's income-generating potential. The requested damages, $12 million. Marcus tucked the documents into his briefcase and continued into the building, determined not to let this development disrupt the day's planned improvements. In the newly renovated common room, volunteers were setting up a computer lab with equipment. Marcus had donated 10 refurbished laptops for residents to use for job searches, schoolwork, or skills training. Mr. Blackwood, Leo waved from where he was helping unpack monitors. Look what came for the art corner. In the far section of the common room, easels and art supplies had been arranged near windows that flooded the space with natural light. Marcus had ordered basic materials, but what Leo showed him now was professional-grade high-quality pastels, watercolors, and drawing tablets. These aren't from me, Marcus said, examining the supplies with genuine confusion. Alina approached, clipboard in hand. She'd gradually taken on a leadership role in coordinating volunteer efforts among residents. Anonymous donation, she explained, delivered this morning with a note saying it was for the talented young artist at Westlake. Marcus raised an eyebrow. Any idea who? Alina shrugged, but her eyes held a knowing glint. The only person I mentioned Leo's art to outside Westlake was Detective Chen. When she came to take statements about the building conditions, before Marcus could process this information, his phone rang. The caller ID showed his lawyer's name. Excuse me, he said, stepping into the hallway. David, what's the verdict? It's not good, Marcus. The lawyer's voice was grim. Mills has hired Sullivan and Reed. They're bringing their full arsenal, and they've leaked the lawsuit to the press. As if on cue, Marcus's phone buzzed with news alerts. He pulled the phone from his ear long enough to glimpse the headlines. Notorious con artist sued over slum property. Landlord claims fraud in Westlake. Apartments, Sailor Marcus Blackwood, Robin Hood, or calculating criminal. Perfect, Marcus muttered, returning to the call. What's our defense? Legally, the sale was clean, but they're painting this as part of a larger con. They're claiming you planned to use the building for money laundering or tax evasion. That's absurd, is it? David's voice sharpened. Marcus, you've spent years establishing a very specific reputation. Now you suddenly buy a slum property and turn it into a charity case. Even I don't understand your angle here. Marcus was silent for a moment. There is no angle. David, a beat of disbelieving silence. Then you need to explain that to a judge in a way that sounds plausible, and you need to prepare the residents for what's coming. What do you mean? Mills's team will depose them. Dig into their lives. Try to find connections to you that suggest this was all staged. David's voice softened slightly. They'll try to hurt anyone who matters to you, Marcus. That's how these people operate. After ending the call, Marcus stood motionless in the hallway, a cold feeling settling in his stomach. He'd anticipated legal challenges but had underestimated Mills's desperation. The man wasn't just trying to recoup financial losses, he was trying to destroy Marcus's credibility and, by extension, the safe haven Westlake had become. When he returned to the common room, Alina took one look at his face and sent Leo to help Mr. Washington with the computer setup. Bad news, she asked quietly. Mills is escalating the lawsuit, and he's taking it to the press. Marcus handed her his phone with the news alerts. The residents should know what's coming. Alina scanned the headlines, her expression hardening. You want to call a meeting? Yes, tonight if possible. By 7 p.m., the common room was packed. All renovations had been completed, creating a warm, inviting space that contrasted sharply with the neglected building of just 2 months ago. Residents filled every chair, with many standing along the walls. The mood was tense. News traveled fast, and many had already seen the headlines. Marcus stood before them, feeling uncharacteristically exposed. In his years of running cons, he'd played many roles, worn many faces, but standing before these people who had begun to trust him, he found he could offer nothing but the unvarnished truth. As many of you have heard, Vernon Mills is suing me over the purchase of this building, he began. He claims I defrauded him by not disclosing my intentions to make Westlake rent-free. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. The lawsuit itself is not a serious threat to our arrangement, Marcus continued. The sale was legal, and your right to remain here is protected. But Mills's legal team will try to prove that this whole situation is part of a larger scheme. What kind of scheme? Mrs. Diaz called out. Marcus met her gaze directly. They'll suggest that I'm using Westlake for money laundering, tax evasion, or some other criminal enterprise. And they'll try to implicate all of you as either victims or accomplices. The room erupted in angry exclamations. Mr. Washington thumped his cane against the floor for attention. We all know who you were before you came here. Mr. Blackwood, the elderly man said, his voice cutting through the noise. A con man, yes. But you've been straight with us from day one. More than Mills ever was. Nods of agreement followed this statement, but Alina raised a practical concern. What does this mean for us? Practically speaking, Mills's lawyers will want to depose some of you, Marcus explained. They'll ask invasive questions about your relationship with me, about conditions in the building, about any suspicious activities you might have witnessed. They're trying to scare us, Alina realized. Make us turn on you. Yes. Marcus didn't sugarcoat it. And I need to be clear, I can't ask any of you to lie for me. If you're called to testify, tell the truth, about everything, including that you saved my Martha's medical records, Mr. Washington asked. That you paid for specialists for Mia Rodriguez? That you've invested millions fixing a building that should have been condemned years ago? The truth is the truth, Marcus said simply. A young father from the 4th floor stood up. I work in construction. The violations in this building, they weren't accidental. Mills knew exactly what he was doing. He cut corners that put our lives at risk. We have documentation of all of it, Marcus confirmed, and it will be part of our defense. Then we fight, Elena declared, standing to face the crowd. Not just for Mr. Blackwood, but for ourselves. For the community we're building here. The resolution in her voice sparked something in the room, a collective determination that transformed anxiety into resolve. As the meeting continued, residents organizing into committees and planning their response. Marcus stood slightly apart, watching with a mixture of gratitude and concern. These people were willing to stand by him despite knowing his past. Despite the risks, it was a kind of trust he'd never experienced and had done nothing to deserve. Outside the common room window, he noticed a familiar figure watching from the street. Detective Chen leaned against her car, observing the gathering with an unreadable expression. Their eyes met briefly across the distance. She gave a small nod of solidarity or warning. Marcus couldn't tell before slipping into her car and driving away. The call came at 2 a.m., pulling Marcus from a restless sleep. Detective Chen's name flashed on his phone screen. "Blackwood," she said without preamble. "Your partner Jake is meeting with Mills's lawyers right now at the Four Seasons. He's selling you out." Marcus sat up, instantly alert. "How do you know?" "This, I have sources." Chun's voice was clipped. "He's offering details of your past operations, including documentation that could connect you to financial crimes we haven't even uncovered yet." "Why are you telling me this?" A pause. "Because what you're doing at Westlake matters. It's not enough to balance your karmic scales, but it's something real." Marcus processed this, understanding the significance of a fraud detective actively warning him. "Thank you. Don't thank me, just be careful. And Blackwood, whatever Jake has on you, you might want to get ahead of it." After she hung up, Marcus sat in the darkness, turning over his options. Jake knew enough about his past operations to cause serious damage not just to the Westlake situation, but potentially resulting in criminal charges. They'd been partners for nearly a decade, each holding the other's secrets as mutual insurance. That insurance had just become a liability. By dawn, Marcus had formulated a plan. He made 3 calls, one to his lawyer, one to his accountant, and one to Elena. "I need to meet with all the residents tonight," he told her. "Something's happened." "Good something or bad something?" Elena asked, the sounds of her morning routine, with the children audible in the background. "Necessary something," Marcus replied. 7 p.m. if possible. "We'll be there." His next stop was Detective Chin's precinct. The detective looked up in surprise when he was escorted to her desk, coffee cup frozen halfway to her lips. "Blackwood, didn't expect to see you walk in here voluntarily." "I need to talk," Marcus said quietly. "Somewhere private." Chen led him to an interview room, closing the door behind them. "If this is about last night, it's about everything," Marcus interrupted. "I want to make a deal." Chen's eyebrows rose. "I'm listening." "Jake isn't just selling information about Me Too Mills. He's also trying to sabotage Westlake, convincing Mills's team that the building is central to a money laundering operation I've been running for years." "Is it?" Chen asked bluntly. "No, but Jake can make it look that way." Marcus placed a flash drive on the table between them. "This contains documentation of every operation Jake and I ran together. Bank accounts, targets, methods, everything you need to build cases against both of us." Chen stared at the drive, then at Marcus. "Why would you give me this?" "Because I'm guilty of everything on there, and I'm willing to face those consequences." Marcus met her gaze steadily. "But I need your help protecting Westlake and its residents." "You're offering yourself up to save the building," Chen said slowly, realization dawning. "This isn't a negotiation. It's a sacrifice play. Call it what you want. Will you help?" Chen picked up the flash drive, weighing it in her palm. "What exactly are you asking for?" "Time. I need to transfer ownership of Westlake to a resident-controlled housing cooperative before I'm arrested. And I need assurance that the residents won't be implicated in any of my past activities." "That's a tall order. I thought you were good at your job, Detective." A reluctant smile tugged at Chun's lips. "I am. That's why I caught you." "You didn't catch me. I surrendered." Marcus stood. "There's a difference." As he turned to leave, Chen called after him. "The art supplies. For Leo. That was you, wasn't it?" Marcus paused at the door. "I have no idea what you're talking about, Detective." That evening, the common room at Westlake was filled beyond capacity. Residents packed shoulder to shoulder, the atmosphere thick with anticipation. Word had spread that Marcus had called an emergency meeting, and no one wanted to miss it. Marcus stood before them, tie loosened, looking more disheveled than anyone had seen him. The past 12 hours had been a whirlwind of legal consultations and financial arrangements. "Thank you all for coming," he began. "I'll get straight to the point. Vernon Mills has found a new weapon to use against us. My former business partner, Jake Sullivan, has provided him with information about my past activities that could not only derail our legal defense but potentially implicate Westlake in criminal investigations." Concerned murmurs rippled through the crowd. "To be absolutely clear," Marcus continued, "Westlake has never been used for any illegal purpose. But Jake knows how to spin convincing narratives with half-truths. It's what we both did for years." "What does this mean for us?" Mr. Washington asked, voicing the question on everyone's mind. It means I need to remove myself from the equation. Marcus's voice was calm, matter-of-fact. As long as I own this building, it will be vulnerable to legal attacks and false accusations. Alina stepped forward. What are you saying? I'm transferring ownership of Westlake to a resident-controlled housing cooperative. Marcus gestured to his lawyer, who stood by with a stack of documents. The paperwork is ready. By tomorrow morning, Westlake will belong to all of you collectively. Stunned silence fell over the room. Each resident will automatically receive a share in the cooperative, Marcus explained. You'll elect a board to manage operations. The building's maintenance fund, which I've endowed with enough to cover costs for the next 5 years, will be controlled by that board. And you? Alina asked quietly. Marcus hesitated, then decided the residents deserved the full truth. I've turned myself in to the authorities. I've provided evidence of my past crimes in exchange for assurances that none of you will be implicated. The room erupted in shock and protest. Leo pushed his way to the front, face contorted with distress. You can't go to jail. You're helping people. Marcus knelt to the boy's level. Sometimes helping people means facing consequences, Leo. The things I did, they hurt people. I can't undo that, but I can try to make it right. But we need you here, Leo insisted, tears welling in his eyes. No, you don't. Marcus smiled gently. Look around. This community you've built, it's stronger than you know. And now it truly belongs to all of you. As the meeting continued, Marcus's lawyer explaining the details of the cooperative structure, Marcus slipped quietly to the back of the room. Detective Chen waited by the door, her expression solemn. It's time, Marcus asked. Chen nodded. Your lawyer negotiated 24 hours to complete the property transfer before we formally arrest you. Use it wisely. As they walked toward the exit, Alina intercepted them. This isn't right, she said fiercely. After everything you've done, it's exactly right. Marcus interrupted gently. For the first time in my life, I'm doing the right thing. Alina, don't take that away from me. Something in his tone made her step back, studying his face with new understanding. You're not just doing this for us, are you? This is for you too. Let's just say I have debts that need repaying. Marcus glanced back at the room full of residents, people who had been strangers 3 months ago and were now a community. Some debts you can never fully repay, but you have to try. Chen touched his elbow lightly. We need to go. As Marcus turned to leave, he felt a small hand slip into his. Leo stood there, his young face solemn beyond his years. I made this for you, the boy said, pressing a folded paper into Marcus's hand. So you don't forget us. Marcus unfolded it to find a detailed drawing of Westlake Apartments, not as it had been, but as it now was. Windows gleaming, rooftop garden flourishing, residents gathered outside. In the foreground stood a tall figure that was unmistakably Marcus, surrounded by the community he'd helped create. For a moment, his careful composure cracked, emotion washing over his face. Thank you, Leo, he managed, carefully refolding the drawing and placing it in his pocket. I couldn't forget you if I tried. The courtroom hushed as Marcus Blackwood was led in, wearing a simple gray suit rather than his usual tailored attire. 6 weeks had passed since his surrender to authorities, 6 weeks of legal maneuvering, plea negotiations, and preparation for this moment. In the front row sat a delegation from Westlake. Alina, Mr. Washington, Mrs. Diaz, and several other residents who had volunteered to testify. Leo was conspicuously absent. Alina had refused to let him miss school for the proceedings. Despite his protests, the civil case brought by Vernon Mills had been consolidated with the criminal charges against Marcus, creating a complex legal proceeding that had attracted significant media attention. Journalists filled the back rows, notebooks and tablets ready. Most surprising was Detective Chen's position, not in the gallery, but at the prosecution table. After Marcus's surrender, she had been assigned as the lead investigator, working closely with the district attorney to build the case. Judge Harriet Powell, a stern woman with 3 decades on the bench, called the court to order. Before we proceed, I understand the defense has a motion. She peered over her glasses at Marcus's attorney. David Levinson rose. Yes, Your Honor. In light of new evidence that has come to our attention, Mr. Blackwood wishes to change his plea. Murmurs rippled through the courtroom. Marcus had initially pleaded not guilty to all charges, a standard opening move while his legal team negotiated behind the scenes. Mr. Blackwood, Judge Powell turned her attention to Marcus. Is this correct? Marcus stood. Yes, Your Honor. And how do you plead to the charges of wire fraud, money laundering, and securities fraud? Marcus met the judge's gaze steadily. Guilty to all charges, Your Honor. The murmurs grew louder. Judge Powell rapped her gavel once. Order. Mr. Blackwood, you understand that by pleading guilty, you waive your right to a trial. I do, Your Honor. Very well. Judge Powell made a notation. We'll proceed to Vernon Mills's civil complaint against Mr. Blackwood for fraudulent misrepresentation in the sale of Westlake Apartments. Vernon Mills sat at the plaintiff's table, a small, wiry man with thinning hair and expensive glasses. Beside him, His legal team from Sullivan and Reed, three sharp-suited attorneys with predatory attentiveness, shuffled papers confidently. Mills's lead attorney, Catherine Sullivan, rose. Your Honor, Mr. Mills contends that Mr. Blackwood deliberately concealed his intentions for Westlake Apartments during purchase negotiations, depriving Mr. Mills of the property's true market value. We have evidence that Mr. Blackwood's conversion of the building into a rent-free cooperative was part of a larger money laundering scheme. Objection. David Levinson was on his feet. Counsel is presenting speculation as fact. Sustained. Judge Powell turned to Sullivan. Present your evidence, counselor, not your conclusions. Sullivan nodded smoothly. We call Vernon Mills to the stand. Mills took the oath and settled into the witness chair, projecting an air of wounded businessman. Under Sullivan's careful questioning, he described the sale of Westlake how Marcus had approached him through a real estate broker, offering cash for a quick closing with minimal inspection. Did Mr. Blackwood ever indicate that he intended to make the building rent-free? Sullivan asked. Never, Mills replied emphatically. That would have significantly impacted the property's valuation. Westlake generated over $800,000 annually in rental income, and would you have sold the property had you known Mr. Blackwood's intentions? Absolutely not. The income potential was the property's primary value. When Sullivan concluded, David Levinson approached the witness stand. Despite his tailored suit and polished manner, there was something sharp in his eyes as he faced Mills. Mr. Mills, how long did you own Westlake Apartments? 12 years? And during that time, how much did you spend annually on maintenance and repairs? Mills shifted slightly. I don't recall the exact figures. Let me refresh your memory. Levinson presented a document. According to your own tax filings, you spent an average of $42,000 annually on maintenance, approximately 5% of your rental income. Is that correct? Maintenance costs vary year to year. Please answer the question, Mr. Mills. Yes, that's correct. And are you familiar with industry standards for maintenance expenditures on rental properties of Westlake's age and size? Mills' expression tightened. Generally, would it surprise you to learn that the standard is 20 to 25% of rental income? Different properties have different needs. Levinson nodded, his manner deceptively casual. Indeed. Speaking of Westlake's specific needs, were you aware that the building had black mold infestations in 17 units? I received some complaints. Were you aware that 3 children were hospitalized for respiratory distress linked to conditions in your building? Mills glanced at his attorneys. I was not personally involved in day-to-day tenant issues. Were you aware that Mrs. Martha Washington died of pneumonia, exacerbated by living without heat for 3 winters in apartment 4B? A ripple went through the courtroom. Mr. Washington stared steadily at Mills, his weathered hands tight around his cane. Objection. Sullivan was on her feet. Counsel is attempting to turn this into a wrongful death case, which is not before the court. I'm establishing Mr. Mills's knowledge of the property's condition, which is directly relevant to its value, Levinson countered. I'll allow it, Judge Powell ruled. The witness will answer. Mills swallowed visibly. I was not aware of any tenant death. Levinson approached with another document. This is a certified letter sent to your office on February 18th last year, from James Washington, informing you of his wife's death and including her medical report. The receipt shows it was signed for by your office manager. Do you still maintain you were unaware? The courtroom was utterly silent now. Mills's face had paled. I may have been informed. Levinson continued relentlessly, producing document after document. Tenant complaints, building inspection failures, citations that had been paid but never addressed. With each exhibit, Mills seemed to physically shrink in the witness chair. One final question, Mr. Mills, Levinson said eventually. When you sold Westlake to Mr. Blackwood, were you aware that the building had over 340 code violations that rendered it legally uninhabitable? Mills looked to his attorneys, who sat in stony silence. I want to invoke my Fifth Amendment right, he said finally. Judge Powell leaned forward. Mr. Mills, this is a civil proceeding. While you have the right not to incriminate yourself, I can and will draw negative inferences from your refusal to answer. After Mills stepped down, Levinson called his witnesses first, the city building inspector who detailed the extensive violations found during renovations. Then, a series of Westlake residents who testified about living conditions under Mills's ownership. Mr. Washington described his wife's decline, his voice steady despite the emotion evident in his face. I showed Mr. Mills the doctor's report that said the cold and mold were killing her. He said if I didn't like it, I could move out. Alina testified about her daughter's hospitalizations. Mia was admitted 3 times for respiratory distress. Each time, the doctors said it was related to environmental factors, specifically, the black mold in our apartment. When Marcus finally took the stand, the courtroom was thick with tension. He had sat quietly throughout the proceedings, his expression giving nothing away. Mr. Blackwood, Levinson began, why did you purchase Westlake Apartments? Marcus was silent for a moment, gathering his thoughts. I wanted to stop what was happening there. Could you elaborate? When I was 9 years old, my mother and I were evicted from a building very similar to Westlake. We had nowhere to go. We ended up sleeping in our car during a winter storm. Marcus's voice remained steady, but his knuckles whitened where they gripped the rail. My mother died that night. Hypothermia. Officially. Indifference. In reality, a hushed stillness fell over the courtroom. When I learned about Westlake, about Mr. Washington's wife, about the children getting sick, I saw history repeating itself. I couldn't stop what happened to my mother, but I could stop it from happening to someone else. Did you mislead Mr. Mills about your intentions for the property? No. I told him I was buying it as an investment, which was true. The best investment I've ever made. When Sullivan cross-examined Marcus, her approach was aggressive, attempting to portray his actions as part of a complex financial scheme. Isn't it true that you've spent your entire adult life defrauding people? She demanded. Yes, Marcus answered simply. I've committed numerous financial crimes, for which I've pleaded guilty today. Then why should this court believe your supposed humanitarian motives for Westlake? Marcus looked directly at Mills, because even a thief recognizes when a line has been crossed. I stole money? Mills stole lives. Objection? Sustained. The jury will disregard. But the impact of Marcus's words remained, hanging in the air long after he stepped down. In her closing argument, Sullivan tried to refocus on the contract dispute, arguing that regardless of building conditions, Marcus had a legal obligation to disclose his intentions. Levinson's closing was brief and devastating. This case isn't about a contract. It's about a building where people were dying because one man valued profit over human life. Mr. Blackwood didn't defraud Mr. Millsy, paid fair market value for a property that was, by Mr. Mills's own neglect, nearly uninhabitable. If anything, Mr. Mills defrauded Mr. Blackwood by concealing the building's true condition. When Judge Powell delivered her ruling, her voice was firm. This court finds in favor of the defendant, Marcus Blackwood. Mr. Mills's claim of fraudulent misrepresentation is dismissed with prejudice. She looked directly at Mills. Furthermore, I am referring this matter to the District Attorney's Office for investigation into potential criminal negligence and involuntary manslaughter charges related to the death of Martha Washington. As Mills sat in stunned silence, Judge Powell turned to Marcus. Mr. Blackwood, you have pleaded guilty to serious financial crimes. While your actions at Westlake Apartments are commendable, they do not erase your prior offenses. I will take both into consideration at sentencing next week. As Marcus was led away by court officers, he caught Elena's eye in the gallery. She gave him a small nod, not forgiveness perhaps, but acknowledgement of a debt paid in part. Detective Chen waited by the courtroom door. As Marcus passed, she spoke quietly. You could have fought the charges. Made a deal. Some things you can't deal your way out of, Marcus replied. Some debts you just have to pay. 1 week later, the same courtroom was packed beyond capacity for Marcus's sentencing. The case had captured public attention, with media outlets framing it as a modern morality tale. The con man who found redemption through an act of unexpected generosity, only to face justice for his past crimes. The Westlake residents occupied the first 3 rows, a visual statement of solidarity. Alina sat in the center, flanked by Mr. Washington, and, despite her earlier reluctance, Leo, the boy, had begged to attend, arguing that he was old enough to understand what was happening. Judge Powell called the court to order, her expression solemn as she addressed Marcus. Mr. Blackwood, you have pleaded guilty to 17 counts of wire fraud, money laundering, and securities fraud. These are serious offenses that caused real harm to numerous victims. She adjusted her glasses, studying the papers before her. However, this court has also received an unprecedented number of character statements on your behalf, primarily from the residents of Westlake Apartments. Marcus looked surprised. He glanced back at Alina, who gave a small shrug. Clearly, this had been organized without his knowledge. I have also taken into consideration your voluntary surrender and cooperation with authorities, as well as your actions regarding Westlake Apartments, which Detective Chen has described as genuine atonement. Judge Powell looked directly at Marcus. Do you wish to address the court before I pronounce sentence? Marcus stood, his hands steady as he adjusted his tie. For once, he had prepared no script, no careful manipulation of words to achieve a desired outcome. He spoke simply, his voice carrying clearly through the hushed courtroom. Your Honor, I don't seek leniency or special consideration. I committed the crimes I'm charged with, and I accept whatever sentence the court deems appropriate. He paused, his gaze sweeping briefly over the Westlake residents. I spent most of my life taking money, security, trust from people who didn't deserve to be victimized. Nothing I can do will fully make amends for that, but I hope that Westlake Apartments will outlast both my crimes and whatever good I've managed to do. That's all. Judge Powell nodded, then delivered her ruling. Marcus Blackwood, this court sentences you to 5 years in federal prison, followed by 3 years of supervised release. Additionally, you are ordered to pay restitution to your victims in the amount of $20 million. The sentence was less than the prosecution had requested, but more than Marcus's lawyers had hoped for. A murmur ran through the courtroom, some expressing satisfaction, others disappointment. Court is adjourned, Judge Powell declared, bringing down her gavel with finality. As court officers approached to take Marcus into custody, Alina quickly moved forward, bringing Leo with her. "Wait," she called to the officers. "Just a moment, please." The lead officer hesitated, then nodded, allowing Alina and Leo to approach Marcus. "You didn't have to come," Marcus said quietly. "Yes, we did." Elena's voice was firm. "The whole building wanted to be here. You've given us back our dignity, our safety. We couldn't let you face this alone." Leo stepped forward, his young face solemn but determined. "I brought you something else." He handed Marcus a small, flat package wrapped in brown paper. "The art teacher at school helped me frame it. It's for your ... wherever they put you." Marcus carefully unwrapped the package to reveal a framed drawing, an updated version of the Westlake sketch Leo had given him the night of his surrender. This one showed the building in full bloom, the rooftop garden lush, children playing on a new playground installed on what had once been a garbage-strewn side lot. Every detail was rendered with remarkable skill, from the expressions on tiny faces to the flowers climbing trellises along the building's facade. Leo, this is ... double quotes. Marcus struggled to find words. "This is extraordinary. I put in everyone," Leo said proudly, pointing to tiny figures throughout the scene. Mr. Washington, teaching chess in the park, Mom at the community clinic, Mia helping with the garden. And look, he pointed to a small figure standing slightly apart, watching over the scene. "That's you, coming home." Marcus stared at the drawing, something tightening in his throat. The simple optimism of it, the belief that he would return someday to the community he'd helped create, was almost more than he could bear. "Thank you," he managed finally. "I'll keep it with me. Promise?" Leo asked, suddenly looking very young and vulnerable. "Promise." Marcus carefully rewrapped the drawing and handed it to the court officer, who nodded in understanding it would be processed with Marcus's personal effects. Alina stepped forward, then, surprising Marcus with a brief, fierce hug. "We'll be here when you get out," she whispered. "Don't you dare disappear on us." Before Marcus could respond, Detective Chen approached, indicating to the court officers that it was time. As they prepared to lead him away, protests erupted from the Gallery Westlake residents, rising to their feet, calling out support, some even moving toward the barriers. "This isn't right. He helped us when no one else would. 5 years is too much." Judge Powell rapped her gavel sharply. "Order. There will be order in this court." Marcus turned to the residents, raising his hands in a calming gesture. "It's all right," he called. "This is how it should be. Take care of Westlake. Take care of each other." As the officers led him toward the door, the unexpected happened. It started with Mr. Washington, who slowly rose to his feet, leaning on his cane, then Alina and Leo, then Mrs. Diaz. Within moments, every Westlake resident was standing in silent solidarity. Detective Chen, still standing nearby, observed the scene with an unreadable expression. As Marcus passed her, she spoke quietly, for his ears only. "I'll keep an eye on them." On Westlake, Marcus met her gaze. "Thank you." Outside the courtroom, reporters clamored for statements. Through the chaos, Marcus caught a final glimpse of Leo, the boy's face set in determination rather than despair. In that moment, Marcus understood something fundamental had shifted. Whatever happened to him now, whatever price he paid for his past, it wouldn't erase what had been built at Westlake. The community would continue, growing stronger without him, and somehow, that was enough. Federal Correctional Institution, Danbury wasn't as imposing as Marcus had imagined. The low-security prison in Connecticut housed approximately 1,000 inmates, many of them white-collar criminals like himself. The facility was clean, orderly, and far less threatening than the maximum security prisons depicted in films. Still, prison was prison. Freedom was restricted, privacy non-existent, and daily life regulated by strict schedules and countless rules. Marcus adapted quickly, his chameleon-like ability to assess environments and adjust his behavior serving him well in his new surroundings. He kept to himself mostly, avoiding the social hierarchies and power dynamics that defined prison life. He worked in the facility's library, spent his free time reading, and participated in a business skills program teaching fellow inmates basic financial literacy. The first visitor came 3 weeks after his arrival. "Mr. Washington," Marcus said in surprise, taking a seat across from the elderly man in the visitation room. "I didn't expect to see you here." Mr. Washington adjusted his glasses, studying Marcus with his cloudy eyes. "Thought you might be getting lonely, and I wanted to thank you properly, something I didn't get to do before they took you away." "There's nothing to thank me for," Marcus said uncomfortably. "My Martha would disagree." Mr. Washington's voice was gentle but firm. "What Mills did to her, letting her die like that in the cold, it needed to be answered for. You made that happen." Marcus nodded, accepting the thanks with as much grace as he could muster. "How is everyone at Westlake?" Mr. Washington's face brightened. "Thriving. The cooperative is up and running. Elena's the board president. She's a natural leader. That one, we've got committees for everything: maintenance, community events, even a scholarship fund for the building's children." "A scholarship fund?" "Started with money we're saving on rent. 5% of what each family would have paid goes into the fund. Leo's already been nominated for a summer art program." Pride swelled in Marcus's chest, surprising in its intensity. "That's wonderful." We've had some media attention too. Local news did a feature on the Westlake miracle. They called it. Other tenant groups have been reaching out, asking how they can do something similar. And Marcus couldn't help asking. Mr. Washington's expression hardened slightly, facing charges for Martha's death. His other properties are under investigation too. You started something bigger than Westlake, son, when visiting hours ended. Mr. Washington promised to return. The others want to visit too. We've set up a rotation, someone from Westlake every week. Hope that's all right with you. Marcus was touched by the gesture. More than all right. True to Mr. Washington's word, the visits continued. Mrs. Diaz brought homemade cookies that barely passed security inspection. Mr. Patel updated him on the rooftop garden's impressive yield. Other residents came with stories, questions, and always news of Westlake's continuing transformation. 2 months into his sentence, Alina and Leo finally visited. The boy had grown taller in the short time since Marcus had seen him last. His face thinner, as childhood began giving way to adolescence. You look different, Leo blurted as they sat down. Marcus smiled. The prison haircut and standard-issue clothing were a far cry from his former tailored appearance. Good, different, or bad different? Just different. Leo studied him with an artist's eye. More real. Maybe. Elena laughed softly. Leo, remember what we talked about. Filters. It's okay, Marcus assured her. I appreciate honesty. He gestured to the visiting room. So, what do you think of my new accommodations? It's not as bad as in the movies, Leo observed. No bars or guys with tattoos looking menacing. Elena looked mortified. Marcus chuckled. He's right, actually, it's minimum security. More boring than scary. They settled into conversation. Leo eagerly sharing news of his art program, acceptance, and recent school achievements. Elena filled Marcus in on Westlake Developments, the new community clinic opening in what had once been vacant ground floor retail space. The after-school tutoring program, the growing interest from housing advocates and community organizers. Your drawing is on my wall, Marcus told Leo. When there was a lull in conversation, the guards let me put it up. It's the first thing I see every morning. Leo beamed with pride. I'm working on another one, of what Westlake might look like in 5 years. When you get out, the simple confidence in his tone that Marcus would return to Westlake, that he had a place there, was both heartwarming and painful. 5 years was a long time. Leo would be nearly grown by then. Westlake transformed even further. Life would move on without him. As if reading his thoughts, Elena leaned forward. We're not going anywhere, Marcus. Westlake will be waiting for you. After they left, Marcus returned to his cell, more affected by the visit than he'd expected. He lay on his narrow bunk, staring at Leo's drawing, thinking about the strange path that had led him here. The next visitor was a surprise. Detective Chen, Marcus said, taking a seat across from her. Criminal investigation or social call. Chen looked different in civilian clothes, more approachable somehow, though her posture remained alert, professional. Little of both. Officially, I'm here because we've made progress on the Mills case. Thought you'd want to know. And unofficially, a slight smile crossed her face. Unofficially, I was curious how you're adjusting. Career criminals don't usually surrender voluntarily. It's an interesting psychological case study. Happy to be your lab rat. Marcus leaned back, studying her. So, Mills facing multiple charges: involuntary manslaughter for Martha Washington, criminal negligence, housing code violations, tax fraud. We found evidence he was deliberately maintaining unsafe conditions to maximize profit margins. Chen's expression hardened. The kind of financial crimes that actually hurt people. The worst kind, in my book. Will it stick? Some of it. Enough. Chen tapped her fingers thoughtfully on the table. The publicity from your case helped. Put pressure on the DA's office to pursue it aggressively. Marcus nodded, satisfied. Good. They sat in companionable silence for a moment before Chen spoke again. I've been checking in on Westlake. They're doing remarkable things there, so I hear. Marcus couldn't keep the pride from his voice. They miss you. Chen's observation was matter-of-fact, especially the boy, Leo. Marcus looked away. 5 years is a long time. It is. Chen agreed. But you might not serve the full sentence. Good behavior, participation in rehabilitation programs, you could be out in 3, maybe less. Hope flickered briefly, but Marcus tamped it down. I'm not looking for shortcuts. I earned this time. Chen studied him with those perceptive eyes. You know, when I first started tracking you, I thought you were just another clever sociopath. Good at reading people, exploiting weaknesses, manipulating systems. I've seen dozens like you. And now I think you're something more complicated. She leaned forward slightly. Most people in your position would be working every angle, trying to reduce their sentence, maintaining connections with criminal associates. You've done none of that. Maybe I'm just tired, Marcus suggested. Maybe. Chen didn't look convinced. Or maybe Westlake changed you as much as you changed it. After Chen left, Marcus found himself thinking about her words. Had Westlake changed him? Or had it simply uncovered something that was always there, buried beneath years of anger and self-preservation? The visits continued over the months. Each brought news of Westlake's evolution, the cooperative expanding to purchase a neighboring building, the community clinic receiving grant funding, Leo winning a citywide art competition. Through it all, Marcus watched from a distance, offering advice when asked, but mostly just listening, bearing witness to the growth of something he had planted but could not tend. 1 year into his sentence, an unexpected visitor arrived. Ricardo Rodriguez, recently released from prison and reunited with his family at Westlake. "Alina told me what you did," Ricardo said without preamble. "For my family, for Mia, for all of them." Marcus shrugged uncomfortably. "I just provided the opportunity. They did the real work. You and I both know that's not true." Ricardo's gaze was direct, one ex-con to another. "I wanted to thank you, and to tell you they're waiting for you. All of them." As Ricardo described his reunion with his children, his new job at the community center, his second chance at family life, Marcus felt something shift within him, a quiet recognition that redemption wasn't a destination but a journey, one he had only just begun. The seasons changed, marked by the view from the prison library window where Marcus spent most of his days. Summer heat gave way to autumn colors, then winter snow, then spring renewal, in an endless cycle that mirrored the steady rhythm of his sentence. During his second year of incarceration, Marcus received a thick envelope from Alina. Inside was a comprehensive report on Westlake's first 18 months as a resident-owned cooperative, complete with financial statements, meeting minutes, and dozens of photographs documenting the building's ongoing transformation. Marcus spread the materials across his small desk, absorbing every detail. The financial management was impressive. Lena had implemented a sustainable budget that balanced maintenance needs with long-term capital improvements. The endowment fund Marcus had established remained largely intact, used only for major projects that benefited all residents. But it was the photographs that captured his attention most fully. The exterior renovations were complete, the once facade now restored to its original 1920s grandeur. The rooftop garden had expanded dramatically, with dedicated plots for each resident family and a communal section that supplied fresh produce to elderly residents. The ground floor had been completely what had once been abandoned retail space now housed a community clinic, a small library, and a multi-purpose room used for everything from children's tutoring to senior yoga classes. Most striking were the images of the residents themselves. Mr. Washington, seated at a chess table in the new pocket park beside the building, teaching a group of children. Mrs. Diaz proudly displaying jars of homemade salsa made with rooftop garden vegetables. The Rodriguez family, Elena, Ricardo, Leo, and Mia standing together in front of a mural that spanned one entire side of the building. Marcus studied that image more closely. The mural was unmistakably Leo's work, though executed on a grand scale that suggested professional assistance. It depicted a stylized cityscape with Westlake at its center, surrounded by concentric circles of community children playing, gardens growing, people of all ages engaged in various activities. The detail was extraordinary, each tiny figure rendered with personality and purpose. A note in Elena's handwriting accompanied the photo. Leo's design won a city arts grant. Professional muralists helped with execution. He's already been approached about 2 more community projects. Pride welled in Marcus's chest. The boy's talent was flourishing, finding purpose and recognition beyond anything Marcus could have arranged. Another photo showed the newly formed Westlake Board of Directors, residents elected to manage the cooperative's affairs. Alina stood at the center as president, her posture confident, her expression determined. Beside her was Ricardo, now serving as maintenance coordinator, his mechanical skills proving valuable to the building's upkeep. A separate page detailed the Westlake Scholarship Fund, which had already sent 3 residents to vocational training programs and was supporting Leo's participation in a prestigious summer art institute. Accompanying the report was a personal letter from Alina. "Marcus, I thought you should see what you started. Westlake isn't just a building anymore, it's a true community, maybe the first real one many of us have ever known. People look out for each other here. They contribute what they can, whether it's Mrs. Diaz's cooking, Mr. Washington's wisdom, or Ricardo's practical skills. The cooperative model is working better than any of us expected. We've had our challenges, disagreements about priorities, budget constraints, the occasional personality clash, but we work through them together. No one fears being evicted for speaking up. No one suffers in silence when something breaks. You should know that word has spread. Housing advocates have been studying our model. 2 other buildings in the city are now exploring resident ownership. We've hosted workshops, shared our bylaws and financial structures. Your experiment is becoming a movement. Leo asks about you constantly. His art continues to amaze everyone who sees it. The mural has brought positive attention to the neighborhood. We've even had tour groups coming by. He's been offered a partial scholarship to an arts high school for next year. He'd never have had these opportunities without the stability Westlake has provided. Mia's health has improved dramatically. The doctors say her lungs are finally healing now that she's living in a mold-free environment. She's playing soccer this spring, something I never thought I'd see. Ricardo's return has completed our family circle. Having stable housing waiting for him made his re-entry so much smoother than it might have been. He wanted me to tell you that he understands now both the mistakes that led him to prison and the opportunity for redemption that follows. Tell Blackwood, sometimes you have to lose everything to find what matters, were his exact words. We're holding your place here. Whatever you decide when you're released, whether you want to be involved with Westlake or prefer to start fresh elsewhere, know that you'll always have a home with us if you want it. Take care of yourself, Alani Marcus. Read the letter 3 times, something tight and warm expanding in his chest. He had initiated Westlake's transformation, yes, but the residents had taken that beginning and created something far beyond his original vision. This was the true investment not in property or financial schemes, but in people's capacity to build something lasting when given the chance. In the months that followed, updates from Westlake continued to arrive. Leo sent sketches of his new projects, including designs for transforming a vacant lot near the building into a community playground. Mr. Washington reported on the chess club he'd started, which now included members from throughout the neighborhood. Mrs. Diaz shared recipes and stories of the cooking classes she taught in the common kitchen. Through it all, Marcus observed from a distance, offering occasional advice when asked, but mostly marveling at how thoroughly the community had taken ownership not just of the building, but of their collective future. During his 3rd year in prison, Marcus received a visit from David Levinson, his attorney. I have news, David said without preamble. The parole board is considering your case early. Your cooperation with ongoing investigations into Mills's other properties, combined with your exemplary behavior here, has made an impression. Marcus absorbed this with measured optimism. How early are we talking? You could be out in 8 months. With supervised release, 8 months. The number hung in the air between them. Freedom, or some version of it, was suddenly within reach. There's more, David continued. Detective Chino, though she's Lieutenant Chen, now has been advocating for you. Says your information has been instrumental in building cases against 3 other slumlords operating similar schemes to Mills. Marcus raised an eyebrow. Chen's going to bat for me. That's unexpected. Not really. David shuffled his papers. She seems to believe your redemption is genuine, and apparently she's been keeping tabs on Westlake. Says it's become a model for community-based housing solutions. After David left, Marcus sat in the prison library, watching snow fall outside the window, contemplating the possibility of freedom. 8 months. What would Westlake look like by then? What would he find when he returned? If he returned, that evening, he began a letter to Alina, sharing the news of his potential early release and asking, for the first time, if there might be a place for him at Westlake when he returned, not as owner or benefactor, but as community member, contributing whatever skills he could offer. 3 days later, he received a response, the fastest turnaround of any correspondence during his incarceration. The message was brief but clear. Of course there's a place for you here. There always has been. Alina and the Westlake Cooperative Board attached was a formal letter on Westlake Cooperative letterhead, offering him a position as financial advisor to the board upon his release, a part-time role that would allow him to use his expertise while respecting the parole restrictions on his professional activities. For the first time since his sentencing, Marcus allowed himself to truly imagine a future beyond prison walls, not returning to his old life of luxury, built on deception, but building something new, something honest, something that honored his mother's memory in a way that his years of revenge-driven cons never had. That night, he dreamed of a little blue house with white shutters and a big backyard, his mother's dream, so long deferred. But in the dream, the house had transformed into Westlake Apartments, surrounded by gardens, filled with people who had become, against all odds, a kind of family. Freedom arrived on a crisp autumn morning. Exactly 3 years and 2 months after Marcus had entered FCI, the release process was anticlimactic. Paperwork signed. Personal effects returned. Brief meetings with prison administrators and his parole officer. Marcus stood outside the facility gates wearing a simple gray suit that David had brought for the occasion, not the bespoke tailoring of his Conman days, but respectable enough for his re-entry into society. In his hand, he carried a small bag containing the few possessions accumulated during his incarceration, books, letters, and Leo's drawing, carefully preserved in its frame. David waited in the parking lot, leaning against his car. Ready? The lawyer asked, studying Marcus's face for signs of anxiety or excitement. Marcus nodded, taking a deep breath of free air. Ready? The drive back to the city took just over 2 hours. Marcus spent most of it in silence, watching the landscape change. From Connecticut countryside to New York suburbs to the familiar skyline of Manhattan, it felt both strange and mundane. The world had continued without him, unchanged in fundamentals, yet different in countless small ways. We should discuss your financial situation, David said eventually. The restitution payments will continue, of course, but your offshore accounts, the ones the authorities couldn't trace, use them to set up a foundation. Marcus interrupted. Anonymous. Focused on affordable housing initiatives. David glanced over in surprise. That's several $1 million. Marcus, I know exactly how much it is. Marcus's tone was calm. Decided, I don't want or need it. Make it happen. David nodded slowly. All right, it's your money. No, Marcus corrected. It was never really mine. As they approached the city, David cleared his throat. There's something else you should know. There's been some media interest in your release. Your case has become something of a symbol in housing advocacy circles. Marcus frowned. I'm not interested in being a symbol. Nevertheless, you might want to prepare for some attention, especially around Westlake. The building has become quite well known. When they reached Manhattan, David didn't head toward Marcus's old penthouse neighborhood, but drove instead to the area where Westlake stood. As they turned onto the block, Marcus's breath caught. The transformation was even more dramatic than the photographs had suggested. The building's facade gleamed in the autumn sunlight, restored to its original architectural beauty. The surrounding grounds, once littered with trash and abandoned furniture, now featured neatly maintained green spaces. The massive mural on the side wall was a riot of color and life, drawing the eye from blocks away. Most striking was the activity around the building. People moved purposefully in and out, stopping to chat on the sidewalk or gather at small tables set up outside what appeared to be a cafe on the ground floor. Children played in a fenced area, equipped with swings and climbing structures. Seniors sat on benches, watching the scene with evident contentment. They weren't expecting you until tomorrow, David said. I thought you might want a moment to take it in privately first. Marcus nodded gratefully, unable to speak past the tightness in his throat. The soul of this had grown from his impulsive decision to buy a rundown building. The magnitude of it was overwhelming. I can take you to a hotel, David offered. Give you time to adjust before no, Marcus said firmly. I've been away long enough. They parked across the street. Marcus sat for a moment, gathering himself, then opened the car door and stepped out. He stood on the sidewalk, absorbing the scene, invisible among the pedestrians passing by. Then, a shout broke the spell. Mr. Blackwood. Leo Rodriguez Taller. Lena. His boyish features maturing into a teenager's angularity was racing toward him from the direction of the school bus stop. Backpack bouncing against his shoulders. Leo. Marcus barely had time to brace himself before the boy crashed into him with a hug that nearly knocked him off balance. You're early, Mom said tomorrow. Everyone's getting ready. And why, didn't you tell us? Wait till Mr. Washington sees you. And Miyoshi's got a whole welcome speech prepared. Leo's words tumbled out in excited bursts. Marcus found himself laughing. The sound strange to his own ears after so long. It was a last-minute change. I didn't want to make a fuss. Not make a fuss. Are you kidding? Leo grabbed Marcus's arm, tugging him toward the building. Come on. Marcus looked back at David, who waved him on with an understanding smile. I'll bring your things to the apartment later. The lawyer called the apartment. Marcus hadn't considered where he would stay, but apparently arrangements had been made without his input. Leo led him through the building's front entrance, now equipped with a proper security system, and into the lobby. The space was unrecognizable. From the dilapidated, graffiti-scarred area Marcus remembered, warm lighting, comfortable seating, and a small reception desk created an atmosphere more like a boutique hotel than a formerly neglected apartment building. The young woman at the desk looked up, her eyes widening in recognition. Mr. Blackwood, you're back. Before Marcus could respond, Leo was pulling him toward the elevator. Mom's at work, but she'll be home in an hour. Mr. Washington is probably in the community room. Come on. The elevator, once a terrifying contraption that frequently trapped residents between floors, now operated smoothly, carrying them to the third floor. Leo led the way down a hallway with new carpeting and freshly painted walls adorned with framed artwork, much of it, Marcus noted with pride, bearing Leo's distinctive style. They stopped at apartment 3, JI unit. Marcus didn't recall from his time as owner. This was a storage space before, Leo explained, producing a key. We converted it when we knew you were coming home. It's not very big, but it has good light. Mom said that was important for you having light. Leo unlocked the door and stepped back, allowing Marcus to enter first. The apartment was indeed small, essentially a studio, with a separated sleeping area but thoughtfully furnished. Large windows overlooked the street, filling the space with afternoon sunlight. A desk positioned to take advantage of the view. Bookshelves, a comfortable chair. Simple but good quality furnishings. On the wall opposite the bed hung Leo's original drawing of Westlake, professionally framed. We had a copy made from the photo you sent, Leo explained, seeing Marcus's surprise. Thought you might want it here too. Marcus stood in the center of the apartment, overwhelmed by the care evident in every detail. This wasn't charity or obligation. This was welcome. Homecoming, Leo, he said quietly. Thank you. The boy shrugged, suddenly self-conscious. It wasn't just me. Everyone helped. A commotion in the hallway interrupted them. Voices, footsteps, excited calls. Word of Marcus's arrival was spreading through the building. Leo grinned. So much for not making a fuss. The first month of freedom passed in a blur of adjustment. Marcus settled into his apartment at Westlake, navigating the strange territory between gratitude for the community's welcome and discomfort with their admiration. He had never intended to be anyone's hero, and the role sat uneasily on his shoulders. His parole conditions were strict but manageable: regular check-ins, employment verification, restrictions on financial activities, the position with the Westlake Cooperative provided legitimate income while utilizing his skills. 3 days a week he reviewed the building's finances, advised the board on investment strategies for their growing reserve fund, and helped residents with personal financial planning. It was honest work, satisfying in ways his elaborate cons had never been. When he helped Mrs. Diaz create a budget that allowed her to save for her granddaughter's college education, or showed Mr. Washington how to maximize his limited retirement benefits, the gratitude in their eyes was worth more than any con's payoff. On a crisp November morning, Marcus sat in the small cafe that now occupied part of Westlake's ground floor. The business was a cooperative venture run by several residents, serving simple meals and excellent coffee. It had become his habit to start each day here, watching the community's morning rhythms, parents walking children to school, elderly, residents gathering for breakfast, workers rushing to catch buses and trains. "May I join you?" Marcus looked up to find Lieutenant Diana Chen standing beside his table, a coffee cup in hand. She was dressed in plain clothes, dark jeans, a tailored blazer, but her alertness marked her immediately as law enforcement. "Please," Marcus gestured to the empty chair. "This is an unexpected pleasure, Lieutenant. I was in the neighborhood." Chen settled across from him, studying his face. "Freedom suits you." "More than I expected," Marcus admitted. "How's the Slumlord Task Force?" Chen's promotion had come with leadership of a specialized unit targeting housing exploitation, an initiative partly inspired by the Westlake case. Making progress. Mills's conviction created momentum. "We've built cases against 3 other major offenders, with more in the pipeline." She sipped her coffee. "Your information has been valuable. Glad to help." Marcus meant it sincerely. "Any news on the Washington case specifically?" Vernon Mills had eventually pleaded guilty to negligent homicide in Martha Washington's death, but sentencing had been delayed by various legal maneuvers. Finally scheduled for next month. Chen's expression hardened slightly. "His lawyers are still pushing for probation only." "That's unacceptable." "Agreed." Chen set down her cup. "Which brings me to why I'm here. The DA wants Mr. Washington to make a victim impact statement. He's reluctant. He's a private man," Marcus noted, "and reopening that wound could help ensure Mills serves time." Chen finished. "Washington respects you. We thought you might talk to him." Marcus considered this. "I'll speak with him, but I won't pressure him. That has to be his choice." Chen nodded, accepting the boundary. They sat in companionable silence for a moment, watching the cafe's morning bustle. "You know," Chen said eventually, "when I first started tracking you, I had a very clear image of who Marcus Blackwood was. Brilliant, amoral, driven by greed and the thrill of manipulation." "An accurate assessment at the time," Marcus acknowledged. "Was it?" Chen studied him thoughtfully. "Because a man solely motivated by those things doesn't surrender himself to save a building full of strangers. There was always something else driving you." Before Marcus could respond, the cafe door opened, and Detective Ramirez, Kun's former partner, now working on her task force, entered with evident urgency. "Lieutenant, we've got movement on the Parkside Properties case. Owners trying to clear the building before our inspection." Chen stood immediately. "Forced evictions. Water and electricity shut off this morning. Tenants being told they have 24 hours to vacate." "How many units?" Marcus asked, rising as well. 42, Ramirez replied. "Mostly immigrant families, elderly, vulnerable people, unlikely to know their rights." Marcus and Chen exchanged glances, a shared understanding passing between them. "I know someone who could help," Marcus said. 2 hours later, Marcus stood in the Parkside Apartments lobby with Alina Rodriguez and a team of volunteer paralegals from a housing rights organization. Chen and her officers had secured an emergency court order preventing the utility shutoffs, but the situation remained tense. Scared residents gathered around Alina as she explained their legal protections in both English and Spanish. Her authority developed through her leadership at Westlake reassured families who had been on the verge of packing their belongings. "No one is going anywhere today," she told them firmly. "This building cannot be emptied without proper notice and relocation assistance. We'll make sure everyone knows their rights." Marcus observed from the periphery, helping where needed but letting Alina take the lead. This was her element now, a role she had grown into naturally when the immediate crisis was contained. Chen approached Marcus as he was organizing information packets for residents. "This was well done," she acknowledged. "But temporary? These people need a long-term solution." Marcus nodded. "I've been thinking about that." Back at Westlake that evening, Marcus called an informal meeting with Alina, Ricardo, and several other board members. In the community room, surrounded by the cooperative's success, he outlined a bold proposal. Parkside is just one building, but there are dozens like it throughout the city, properties deliberately neglected until they become uninhabitable, forcing vulnerable residents out to make way for luxury development. Marcus pulled up financial projections on his laptop. "What if we created a pathway for these buildings to follow Westlake's model?" Alina leaned forward. "You're talking about expanding the cooperative concept." "Exactly. A network of resident-owned buildings, sharing resources, expertise, purchasing power." Marcus's eyes were alight with purpose. Westlake has proved the model works. Now we scale it. With what money? Ricardo asked practically. Most of these tenants can barely make rent, let alone purchase buildings. That's where the foundation comes in. Marcus explained the entity he had created with his remaining offshore funds. It can provide bridge financing, technical assistance, legal support. The residents do the rest, just as you all did here. The group discussed the idea late into the night, identifying challenges, refining the approach. By midnight, the Westlake Housing Justice Initiative had taken shape on an ambitious plan to transform neglected properties into resident-owned cooperatives throughout the city. Walking back to his apartment, Marcus felt a sense of alignment he had never experienced during his years of cons. This wasn't about revenge or restitution anymore. It was about building something that could outlast him, address the systemic issues that had claimed his mother's life, and offer others the security she had been denied. The next morning, he found Lieutenant Chen waiting at his usual cafe table. "Heard about your meeting last night," she said without preamble. "News travels fast at Westlake. Eavesdropping now, Lieutenant." Marcus took the seat across from her. "Community policing." Chen's expression was serious. "This initiative, you're planning it. Going to make powerful enemies, developers, property management companies, politicians with financial interests in gentrification. I'm aware. Some of those enemies might dig into your past, look for ways to discredit you or the project." Marcus considered this. Then perhaps the initiative needs a different public face. Someone without my baggage. Elena Rodriguez, Chen suggested immediately. "My thought exactly." Marcus smiled slightly. With proper support behind the scenes, Chen studied him over her coffee cup. "You're really doing this? Committing to systematic change, not just one symbolic gesture?" "It appears so." Marcus sounded almost surprised himself. "Turns out redemption is habit forming." "Well," Chen said after a moment, "if you're determined to make powerful enemies, you might as well have allies in useful places." She handed him a business card with her personal number written on the back. "For when not if you need help navigating official channels." As she stood to leave, she paused. "You know, Blackwood, in all my years in law enforcement, you're the first criminal I've actually been glad I couldn't catch sooner." Marcus watched her walk away, turning her card thoughtfully between his fingers. Ally was not a word he had much experience with. Neither was purpose, at least not the kind that woke you in the night with new ideas rather than old regrets. Yet here he was, finding both in the most unexpected places. 5 years later, Marcus stood on Westlake's rooftop garden, watching the sunset paint the city skyline in shades of gold and amber. The space had flourished beyond anyone's expectations. Lush vegetables in raised beds, fruit trees in containers, flowers everywhere. Bees from the recently added hives buzzed among the blooms, while solar panels gleamed along one edge of the roof. A decade had passed since he'd first purchased the building, a lifetime. In many ways, Vernon Mills was 3 years into a 7-year sentence for Martha Washington's death and related crimes. The slumlord's empire had crumbled, his properties either sold or, in 7 cases, converted to resident-owned cooperatives through the Westlake Initiative. The initiative itself had evolved from a local project into a nationally recognized model. 23 buildings across the city now operated as resident cooperatives, with dozens more in various stages of conversion. A dedicated team of attorneys, financial advisors, and community organizers, many of them former residents of neglected properties, provided the technical assistance needed to navigate the complex process. Marcus's role had remained largely behind the scenes. His criminal record made him an easy target for opponents of the initiative, so he functioned primarily as a strategist and advisor, while Alina served as the organization's public face. Her natural leadership abilities, combined with her powerful, personal story, had made her an effective advocate for housing justice. "There you are," a familiar voice called. Marcus turned to see Diana Chono, longer lieutenant but now captain, crossing the rooftop toward him. Their professional relationship had gradually evolved into friendship, then something more complicated. Neither rushed to define it, content to let it develop at its own pace. "Just getting some air before the ceremony," Marcus explained. Diana joined him at the railing. "Nervous, uncomfortable," he corrected. "I never wanted to be the center of attention." She laughed softly. "Says the man who spent years running elaborate cons that hinged on being memorable enough to gain people's trust. That was different, that was a role, and this isn't." She studied his face, the reformed conman using his powers for good. Marcus considered this. Maybe at first, not anymore. Below them, people were gathering in Westlake's courtyard. From all 23 cooperative buildings, housing advocates, community organizers, even a few politicians who had belatedly recognized the political value of supporting the initiative. A small stage had been set up, chairs arranged in neat rows. "We should head down," Diana said. "They'll be looking for you." The ceremony had been organized to mark the initiative's 5th anniversary and the dedication of the Washington Memorial Funda, new program providing emergency housing assistance to families facing eviction. Mr. Washington had passed away peacefully in his sleep the previous winter, leaving behind instructions that any tributes be directed to Ward, preventing others from experiencing what he and Martha had endured. As they made their way downstairs, Marcus found himself reflecting on the changes 5 years had brought. Leo was now in his 2nd year at Pratt Institute, studying architectural design with a focus on community spaces. His talent had blossomed, earning him scholarships and recognition in the art world. Mia had overcome her health challenges to become a competitive runner, with plans to study medicine. The Rodriguez family had moved to a larger apartment within Westlake when Ricardo was elected building manager, overseeing maintenance for the entire property. In the courtyard, Elena greeted Marcus with a warm hug. "Ready for your moment in the spotlight?" "As ready as I'll ever be," he replied. "This really isn't necessary, you know?" "Of course it is." Elena's tone brooked no argument. "People need to see the face behind the work sometimes. Especially today." The ceremony began with Elena welcoming the assembled crowd and providing an overview of the initiative's accomplishments on families housed, conditions improved, communities preserved. She introduced several residents who shared their stories of transformation from tenants at the mercy of neglectful landlords to owners of their buildings. Marcus sat quietly on the stage, listening. These were the moments that mattered to him, hearing firsthand how the work had changed lives, created stability, built community. His own contribution felt almost incidental compared to what these people had accomplished once given the opportunity. Finally, Elena turned to the dedication of the Washington Memorial Fund. "None of this would exist without 2 people, she said, her voice carrying clearly through the courtyard. Martha Washington, whose unnecessary death became the catalyst for change, and Marcus Blackwood, who channeled his grief and anger into action rather than vengeance." She gestured for Marcus to join her at the podium. Reluctantly, he rose and stepped forward. "Marcus doesn't like public recognition," Elena told the crowd with a knowing smile. "In the 8 years I've known him, he's never once taken credit for what he started. But today, he's going to have to bear with us as we acknowledge the truth. One person with the courage to act differently can transform countless lives." The applause that followed was genuine, heartfelt. Marcus stood uncomfortably under its weight, searching for words that wouldn't sound hollow or so. "Everything Elena said about Martha Washington is true," he began finally. "Her death exposed a system that treats housing, a basic human need, as nothing more than a commodity to be exploited for profit." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "But there's someone else who deserves recognition, someone I've never spoken about publicly." Marcus took a deep breath. "My mother, Sarah Blackwood, froze to death in a car when I was 9 years old. After we were evicted from our apartment in the middle of winter, no shelter would take us, no safety net caught us." A hushed stillness fell over the crowd. "For 20 years I channeled my rage over her death into taking from others, convincing myself that targeting the wealthy somehow balanced the scales." Marcus's voice remained steady, though emotion tightened his throat. "It took Westlake to show me the difference between revenge and justice. Justice isn't taking, it's building, creating, repairing." He gestured to the buildings around them, to the people gathered in the courtyard. "What you've all built here, this is justice. Not what I started, but what you continued and expanded. The true legacy of Westlake isn't a redeemed Conman. It's a community that proves another way is possible." As Marcus stepped back from the podium, his gaze fell on a figure at the edge of the crowd, Leo, who had slipped in late from his classes. The young man stood straight and tall, watching with an artist's observant eyes, a sketchbook tucked under his arm. Beside him, Mia bounced slightly on her toes, her runner's energy apparent even in stillness. After the ceremony concluded and the crowd dispersed into smaller groups for the reception, Leo approached with his sketchbook. "I want to show you something," he said, leading Marcus to a quiet corner of the courtyard. He opened the book to reveal detailed architectural small development of modest houses surrounding a central green space. Each home featured a distinctive blue exterior with white trim. "My final project," Leo explained, "affordable starter homes for families transitioning from the cooperatives to homeownership." The Washington Village. Marcus studied the drawings, noting the thoughtful details: play areas visible from kitchen windows, front porches positioned to encourage neighbor interaction, community gardens integrated throughout. "It's exceptional work," he said honestly. "Look closer at the street names," Leo urged. Marcus peered at the small text marking the development's roadways. One jumped out immediately: Blackwood Way. "Leo, I don't need. It's not for you," Leo interrupted gently. "It's for your mom, for Sarah." The simple acknowledgement of his mother's name, spoken so rarely over the decades, struck Marcus with unexpected force. He stared at the plans, seeing not just buildings but possibilities, futures, safety. "The best part," Leo continued, "is that it's not just a concept. The initiative's board approved preliminary funding last week. We've identified land, the city approves the zoning. We could break ground next spring. A small blue house with white shutters, a garden, a place where no one could make them leave." His mother's dream reimagined and multiplied. She would have loved this, Marcus said quietly. Later that evening, after the celebration had wound down, Marcus returned to the rooftop alone. The city sparkled beneath the rising moon. Countless lights representing countless lives, some secure, others precarious. He heard footsteps behind him and turned to find Diana approaching once more. "Thought I'd find you here," she said, joining him at the railing. "Good speech today. Your mother would be proud." "I hope so." Marcus looked out over the city. "There's still so much to do." "There always will be." Diana's shoulder brushed against his, a small comfort. "But look what's already been accomplished. 23 buildings. Over 1,000 families with secure housing, the Washington Village on the horizon." Marcus nodded, acknowledging the truth in her words. The work would never be complete, the forces of greed and exploitation too deeply entrenched to be entirely vanquished. But the alternative was no longer invisible. A path had been created where none existed before. From below came the sounds of community music from an apartment window. Children's laughter in the courtyard, voices calling good nights. Westlake was alive, thriving, stable in a way that transcended its physical transformation. This, Marcus realized, was what redemption actually looked like. Not a moment of dramatic sacrifice or a single generous gesture, but sustained commitment to repairing harm, creating alternatives, building rather than taking. As he and Diana descended from the rooftop to rejoin the remaining celebration, Marcus paused in the stairwell, looking at a framed photograph hung among many documenting Westlake's journey. It showed the building on the day of his release from prison. Residents gathered outside. A welcome banner stretched across the entrance. Among the crowd stood a small boy with a sketchbook, an elderly man with a cane, a mother with her arm around her daughter, a father recently returned to his family, strangers once, bound together now by something more powerful than common walls. Home, Marcus thought, not a place his mother had found in life, but one he had finally helped create in her memory. "Coming," Diana called from below. "Yes," Marcus answered, turning away from the photograph to descend the stairs. "I'm home."